Okay. Good evening. I think we'll start half a minute early here. Good evening. Welcome to Beaumont City Council regular meeting of Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024 here at 6 p.m. in City Council chambers. This evening, we have Councillor Barnhart and Councillor Van Nieuwkerk who are remoting in this evening. Councillor Barnhart, I see you on the screen. Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, are you with us? Not yet? Okay, he'll be joining as quick as he can. Okay, I'll call to order at 6 o'clock evening. We'll start off on land acknowledgement like you always do. City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all First Nations people of this land, whether it be a First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich vibrant communities across the land. As we gather here in Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis Nation, we acknowledge that we are all treaty people and have ongoing responsibilities to protect and honor the treaty, the inherent rights of the people, and the land. Next, we have proclamation. We have 3 this evening, so bear with me for about maybe 5 minutes here. We'll see. Bell Let's Talk Day, January 24, 2024. Whereas January 24, 2024 marks the 14th annual Bell Let's Talk Day, a day of conversation and mental health. And whereas Bell Let's Talk Day promotes mental health awareness, acceptance, and action built on 4 key pillars: fighting stigma, improving access to care, supporting world-class research, and leading by example in mental health in the workplace. And whereas the City of Beaumont encourages the citizens to join the conversation through calls, texts, and social media interactions to drive Bell's donation to mental health past 100 million now. Now, therefore, be resolved that I, Mayor Bill Danlick, do hereby proclaim January 24, 2024 as Bell Let's Talk Day in the City of Beaumont, Alberta, dated 23rd of January, 2024. Black History Month, February 1st to 29th, 2024. Whereas national recognition occurred on December 14th, 1995, House of Commons unanimously agreed to a motion presented by the Honorable Jean Augustine to recognize February as Black History Month. And whereas Black History Month in Canada is essential since it educates Canadians. Few people in Canada are aware of the fact that African people were once enslaved in the territory that is now known as Canada, or of those who fought enslavement helped to lay the foundation for Canada's diverse and inclusive society. And whereas Black History Month is a time to learn more about these Canadian stories and many other important countries in the Black Canadians and the communities have made history and continued growth of this country. Now, therefore, be resolved that I, Mayor Bill Danlick, do hereby proclaim February 1st to 29th, 2024 as Black History Month, the City of Beaumont, dated 23rd of January, 2024. Last one. Eating Disorder Awareness Week, February 1st to 7th. Whereas eating disorders are the second leading cause of death among all psychiatric illnesses and are the third most common cause of death in teenage girls. We know that through open, supportive dialogue, we can help break the shame and silence that affects nearly 3 million Canadians living with the diagnoses of eating disorders and the millions of others who are struggling with food and weight preoccupation. And whereas Eating Disorders Awareness Week is a time to increase awareness about eating disorders, their impact, and to shed light on the dangerous and pervasive myths that surround them. It is a time of year when Canadians can learn more about eating disorders and all the resources that are available for individuals and family members who are impacted by them. And whereas Eating Disorder Support Network provides information, guidance, and a provincial voice, a community hub, and most of all, support. They offer professionally facilitated support groups online for people across Alberta to access. Thanks to ongoing funding, they are able to offer these groups at a very low cost to the participants, even though they waive fees if possible. People are experiencing financial difficulty. And whereas EDSNA promotes awareness about eating disorders by hosting events and initiatives in Alberta as part of the Canada-wide Eating Disorders Awareness Week, giving presentations to various groups throughout the year and supporting relationships among community partners and treatment professionals to create a more effective voice for eating disorders. Now, therefore, be resolved that I, Mayor Bill Danlick, do hereby proclaim February 1st to 7th, 2024 as Eating Disorder Awareness Week in the City of Beaumont, dated 23rd of January, 2024. All right. Next on our agenda is adoption of the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda this evening? I think your mic's on there. Oh, there it is.
Thank you, Mayor. Administration has no additions to the deletions to the agenda this evening.
Thank you. Would you, Councilor Penrod? Oh, okay. Give me 20 seconds. I'm with you. Okay. Councilor Penrod, how would you like to maybe move the top of the agenda for me, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that the January 23rd, 2024 council agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Councilor, discussion on the motion. Members of council, seeing none. Council, would you please vote on the motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Councilor Barnhart, how do you vote?
In favor, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Van Newkirk, are you joining us by any chance yet? Okay, I'll wait. Just give me a heads up when you hear him click on. Thank you. Thank you, council. That carries unanimously. Motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Next, our agenda is open forum. Madam Clerk, do we have any open forum guests this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we have one open forum presentation. If he wants to make his way to the front there, we'll start.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Please state your name for the record when you're ready, and you have 5 minutes, Mr. Hyde, to present your presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors, city administration, those that are here and those that are watching at home. My name is Paul Hyde, and I have been asked to represent the sports and recreation groups that use the new turf field at Four Seasons Park. More specifically today, I will be addressing the council on behalf of the Beaumont Bandits High School football programs and the Beaumont Bears Minor Football Association. Oop. My slide isn't moving. There we go. Firstly, I wish to thank all the volunteers, the city council and admin for helping secure the turf field. Also providing portable change rooms and washrooms to get us through last season. Sorry. Having said that, there are a few concerns regarding the facility in order to maintain it for years to come. Safety is always a priority, and without adequate upkeep and caretaking, this can be a hazard. Safety concerns from last season include security, which is a metro condition, snow clearing, consistent field grooming, equipment and garbage left on the field, and stands and access to town employees to turn on the lights. Community concerns are around inadequate bleachers to watch the games, and we are in jeopardy of losing our access to the field for all our community groups. So to clarify that concern for access to the field, it stems from complaints from both Metro and CDMFA on the poor washroom and change room conditions, as well as security as mentioned. It is my understanding that the city of Beaumont is responsible for field maintenance staff during use if needed, and proper field access, change rooms, washrooms, lights, score, clock board, snow removal, and regular field maintenance. All our community sports are at risk of having their events shut out of this facility if it is deemed a health and/or safety risk. So we want to work together for future considerations to make sure that this is a healthy and safety environment. So all the community groups are focused on the future and would like to partner with the city of Beaumont to provide a safe and healthy environment for our athletes and spectators. This would include an announcer's tower, appropriate bleachers, permanent change rooms, and washrooms. We're going to build on our success. Again, we would like to thank the administration and the council for the success we have already achieved by hosting a home opener football and jamboree, many events for the other user groups such as soccer and rugby, and for the safe field of our athletes to play on. Thank you again. And these are some supportive statements that came from Metro, as well as the other organizations, CDMFA, addressing the concerns that they have with players on the field. With that, that would conclude my presentation. Is there any questions?
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. Any questions, members of council? I think administration has some thoughts on the presentation, which I'll get to CEO Schwartz in a few minutes here. Any questions from members of council? Councilman Coswayne, you have the floor first, please. Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for coming in, and always good to hear from you. And thanks for representing the broader community groups here. First question, just off the top, obviously bringing it forward to us, but curious if you'd had any discussions with administration around this. Are they aware of the issue? Has it been flagged with them? Does our director know about it? Just curious on if there's been any engagement with our admin before coming here.
There has been letters sent to administration on CDMFA's concern and Metro's concern.
Okay. And so maybe I'll defer to administration in a second. And, clearly the ideal scenario, which is obviously not where we're in, which is why you're in front of us here. Ideal scenario is that you bring these concerns up with administration and you guys can work through them and get to a point where we can move them forward. And then if not, then recognize the need to come in front of council. So I guess, the concerns that you outline here are, that obviously something that we are interested in hearing more from administration on. And so I don't know if Edmund's got a response now or if there's a way to take this back and bring it back in front of us. So maybe I'll defer to administration.
If I may, through the mayor to Councillor Swain, sorry.
I'll let Paul go ahead. You have something to add?
The reason for the urgency is that we do have meetings coming up with both Metro and CDMFA and the groups, and they're coming up very quickly, like February 2nd. So we just need to be able to go back to them and say, we know of these concerns, we are addressing these concerns, and be able to go back to those groups so that they're not coming back to us saying, well, we're not sure if we want you to hold these events here.
Yeah.
So it's just basically, we wanted to make sure that we came back here and we told you guys that this is of an essence, that we can get something back to those groups saying that, yes, we are addressing these concerns. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
CEO Schwartz,
Sorry, I just quickly.
just hang on. CEO Schwartz.
Or Sam wants to respond to Paul.
All right, guys. I'm in charge.
Otherwise, I'll go. Okay.
It's okay, you had your hand up a while ago.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go
I'll
to
go.
Sam first, come back to you, Mike.
I was just going to say, I think my question was for administration to summarize, which Mike will do, but one thing I'm not sure is what the actual ask of council. What are you asking for here today? I understand you've highlighted the problem, and that's fair. So now I'll let the mayor determine where the conversation goes next.
Oh, I'm not sure. No, I'm just kidding. I know where I'm going. CEO Schwartz. And we
Thank
can
you
then
very
got a
much, Mayor
question from
Ganley.
Councilor Telebus, and I'll.
And
I'll
thanks,
question
Paul, for
myself.
coming in conversations I've had with Mr. Suter today, the recommendation is we need to get in the same room and put a plan together for next year. Paul Suter is in charge of the programming, but Parks is in charge of the grounds. But for everybody's edification that's here, and thanks for coming out, some of the things you've talked about, like bleachers, there is in this year's capital plan, $75,000 to purchase better bleachers than the ones that were there last year, permanent ones. 2 years ago, council approved 2 years worth of capital for bleachers. The first set went out into the 80 acres sports fields, and now these ones are coming. The other items you talked about as far as permanent washrooms and concession and change rooms, I thought Min did a great job partnering this year to get some temporary stuff in place. But those items are in the 10-year capital plan. I believe they come back for discussion in 2025. And I know several years ago, we had conversations with the then members of the association about them fundraising and trying to come up with some money on their own to pay for the bleachers. When we first planned the field, that wasn't part of it. But those plans are in place. It's not like we're sitting here idle. The operating items you identified today are great, and thanks for bringing them forward. And I know we can improve on those. So what I recommend, and Paul Suter's advice, is let's get into a room and we will set that up. We will reach out, set up a meeting, and let's put a plan together for the season. I think you can assure the associations that we'll be working on this and we'll be improving it.
Thanks, CEO Schwartz. Appreciate that. Councilor Telebus, Nathan, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I guess it kind of ties into Councillor Monkoff Swain's comment there, but just if you could clarify, Paul, if you don't mind, just exactly what you are looking for. Like, I do see the list here of the requirements for the Metro League and what have you, and there's quite a bit here. So what is it, and what's your expectation to get from this meeting? But before you go to that, I do want to thank you. Obviously, sports within the community is huge, and it keeps kids busy, and we need that. So yeah, I guess thanks for the presentation, and if you could just clarify exactly what you want from us.
Sure,
I'd
not a
appreciate it.
problem. Through the mayor to Councillor to Telebos. The Metro one here is for league playoff games, so it is an ideal situation. There is facilities that are like this in the city. However, we're not at that point yet. It is something to aspire to. I liken it to the same fact that there's a lot of NFL teams that have great stadiums, but they can't hold a Super Bowl because they don't have 85,000 people, can't hold it, right? So if we want to aspire to this, But this doesn't mean that we can't have Metro games here. It just means we may not be able to have a playoff game here. So that would be their list of saying, okay, if you want to have a playoff game, if you want to have this type of stuff, we need you to have this stuff in place. However, it's not something that we're looking to have in the near future. I just wanted to make sure that council and admin were aware that of what was coming up and what they were looking at as bare minimums to have games here, and that is the health concerns that were brought up.
Perfect. Just one last comment. So
Yep.
in terms of the request, under your future considerations, is that primarily what you're looking for in the short term as opposed to longer term? The tower, the appropriate bleachers, permanent change rooms, and permanent washrooms?
That is correct. And I want to reiterate that all of the persons involved here, all the different organizations are more than willing to work with administration to come up with grants, to come up with different ideas, to fundraise, to do whatever has to be done in cooperation with admin to get these things in place. So, and there is, as Mr. Schwartz said, there is already a foundation for this. We just need to find the right path to get there.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Counselor. Appreciate that. And one last quick comment, then administration will reach out. You guys have a meeting as soon as possible regarding the timeline of the Metro and other groups having concerns raised. Now, one thing, when we built the field, which is almost 2 years old now, almost 3, Minor Football Association, and I think the Bears football was going to get together and try and do some fundraising to build a field house, which I was very excited about, as was previous council as well too. We actually had a memorandum of agreement already put up saying what the city will do and look after maintenance, to go to potential sponsors saying, here's what you're buying into. And unfortunately, never much has happened the last couple of years on that. So I'm so willing as mayor, as I mentioned to them before, to meet any organizing and any group willing to contribute to a field house, come and do a presentation. I'm open to any invitation whatsoever. So I'll work with football on that too as well, because they look at building a field house using sponsorship as being part of the money and pinching some from the city as well too. So that's been on our radar for a few years now, and unfortunately has not moved along as fast as I would like to have it move along, but that's okay. So in the meantime, thanks for your presentation, Paul. There's no further questions.
Thank you very
And
much.
we'll move on to have administration reach out to you guys going forward. Oh,
Thank
Nathan, you have something? on
Just
this?
really quick, I just want to clarify, and I know you touched on it, Paul, too, that this field, this setup is for all sports within the community. So
Oh, yeah.
I think it's important to note that as much as football enjoys it, so does soccer, so does rugby, so does all the other sports. So it's really an asset to the entire population here.
And people are looking at Beaumont and saying, wow, it's amazing that you were able to get this done. So
Oh, yeah.
by no means, don't take any of my my presentation here as a slight against what already has been done, because it's been amazing to get this field in place. It's just addressing some of the small concerns that we need going forward.
Yeah, appreciate that. And then clarifying, it is a multi-use field for all sports. I get that totally. But football was coming to us saying, we're gonna go out there and try and find private money, help build a field house. Only they did that, no other user group, just so we're clear on that. I'm not saying soccer's not involved, but they could be if they wanted to be. But
Mhm.
football came to us saying, hey, we'll try and find some sponsors to bring some money. Would you guys be interested in maintaining that? If we built it, heck yes, and nothing's happened. Hopefully it
Right.
will though. And we're open
Yep.
to any conversations in those lines. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate
Thank you
your
again.
presentation
Thank
this
you again,
evening.
Council Mayor.
Thank you very much. Moving on our agenda this evening, next is a consent agenda. Madam Clerk, would you put the consent agenda on the screen, please? And read through it, and then we'll look to adopt the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. Administration does have quite a few items on the consent agenda, so it won't all fit on the screen for everyone to see, but I will definitely read them out here. Pretty tiny. All right.
It's really small. Sorry, I'm just kidding. It just,
It is included in your
yeah, yeah.
agenda packages.
yep.
All right. The following consent agenda items that council consent to approve the following agenda items without debate. Regular council meeting minutes, January 9th, 2024. Council accept the minutes of the January 9th, 2024 regular council meeting as presented. Section 347 to waive property tax late payment fees, rule 009394, that the request for waiving property tax penalties in the amount of $300.89 pertaining to the rule 009394 be denied. Item 6.2, section 347, request to waive property tax penalty late payment fee rule 009717 that the request for waiving property tax penalties in the amount of $339.27 pertaining to the roll of 009717 be denied. Item 6.4, 2024 budget adjustment carry forward for 2023 project budgets, that the 2024 municipal operating budget be adjusted to include carry forward of approval projects for the amount of the 2023 municipal operating budget totaling 1.206400 as set out in attachment 1. That the 2024 municipal capital budget be adjusted to include carry forward of approved budgets for the 2023 municipal capital budget totaling 2.397800 as set out in attachment 1. That the utility 2024 utility operating budget be adjusted to include the carry forward of the approved budgets from the 2023 municipal operating budget totaling 20000 as set out in attachment 1. And that the 2024 utility capital budget be adjusted to include carry forward of approved projects from the 2023 municipal capital budget, including 98,300 as set out in attachment 1. 7.1, bylaw 1035-24, traffic safety bylaw amendment, that bylaw 1035-24, traffic safety bylaw amendment be given first reading, and that the bylaw 035-24 be given second reading. And that sorry, just one moment.
No problem.
Okay, so it's just, sorry, my apologies. Be that bylaw 035-24 be given second reading. 7.2, bylaw 1043-24, 2024 fees and charges, amending bylaw, that bylaw 1043-24, 2024 fees and charges, amending bylaw, a bylaw to amend certain fees, rates, and charges for municipal services be given first reading. That bylaw 1043-24 be given second reading. That bylaw 1043-24 be considered for third reading, and bylaw 1043-24 be given third reading. And item 11.1, regional initiatives update, that the January 23rd, 2024 regional initiatives update be received as information, and that the report remain private pursuant to the Freedom of Information and Protection and Privacy Act under sections 21 and 24.
All right. That was a long one. Haven't put that long in quite a while, actually. So, all right. Is there a member of council willing to move the consent agenda as presented, or is there any changes to the consent agenda? Councilor Natelebus. Nathan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just asked that 6.1 and 6.2 be removed from the consent agenda.
6.1 or 7.1? 7.2.
No, just the waive the property tax.
Yes.
That's 7.1 and 7.2.
Sorry, it's from 6.1 and 6.2.
Sorry?
The numbers are off here. Yeah.
Just to confirm, Councillor, you want the property tax ones taken off the consent agenda, both items?
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrose, you had your mic on. Same thing. Okay, thank you. So they'll be taken off consent agenda. And any further change to the consent agenda? Councillor Barnhart, do you have anything to change?
Mayor, I think this is relevant given that Councillor Natelebus had the wrong numbers in the motion. The numbers do not correspond to the agenda.
Correct. We just said that a second ago. Yeah, we're on that.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further comments or questions, or is there a member of council willing to move the consent agenda as amended? Councillor Cook, Kat, you have the floor.
So moved, your mayor,
Yeah.
As
don't repeat all
amended.
those. Let's not repeat all
as
those.
amended.
We're good. Thank you. Discussion on the motion to approve the revised consent agenda. Seeing none, Councillor, would you please vote on the revised consent agenda? Councillor Barnhart, how do you vote?
In favor?
Thank you. Councillor does carry unanimously, 6-0. Councillor Van Nucler is not just yet with us, but he'll be hopefully joining us as soon as he possibly can. Thank you. Moving on then, we move on to our next part of our agenda is 6.1, bylaw 1042-23, land use bylaw, amending bylaw, medical cannabis production, public hearing, second and third reading. Madam Clerk, our presenter this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to confirm whether or not council wanted to take a 5-minute recess. If Councillor Van Newkirk does not show up when the hearing starts, he will not be able to vote. So if you wanted to take a 5-minute recess to allow for Councillor Van Newkirk to join the meeting, or if you'd like me to go ahead and proceed.
Okay, that's a good question. So he just can't vote on the entire section 6.1?
Correct. He would not be able to vote
Right.
on any of the,
Okay, well, I haven't got a text from him yet saying I know he's trying to get to his hotel room as quick as he can to join us remotely. Let me see if I got something from, just give me 1 second to check quickly. Yeah, no, let's just proceed. Unfortunately,
Okay.
hopefully he'll be as quick as
if he does
but-
come in while I'm doing the procedures, he'll be able to. It's once the hearing's open and the,
Okay, okay, let's proceed accordingly then.
I
Thank
do
you.
have a lot of
Yeah.
procedures to go through, so hopefully he'll join in.
Okay. Just let me just see here.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ware. Welcome everyone to the January 23rd, 2024 City of Beaumont public hearing. Public hearings are an opportunity to speak to council on advertised bylaw or certain resolutions. I will be providing an overview of the public hearing procedures as set out in the city's meeting procedure bylaw. We have been accepting written submissions in the weeks preceding the public hearing. The deadline for written submissions was noon on January 22nd, 2024. Any written submissions that have been received by the deadline have been provided to council in advance of the hearing for their review and are available for public inspection. We did receive one written submission and it has been circulated to council and will be available for inspection in tomorrow's agenda. Registrations to present at the public hearing by electronic means was required by 4 p.m. on January 22nd, 2024. Registrations to present in person is permitted in advance of or in physical at the public hearing. Mayor, we do not have anyone registered who wishes to speak at the public hearing. The procedure for the following hearing is as follows. Administration will make the first presentation on the proposed bylaw, and then council will be invited to ask questions of clarification. Next, members of the public who are present in person today and who wish to speak will be invited to make their presentation. If anyone is here and has not yet registered to speak, please raise your hand and let us know you will, and we'll get your name onto the list of presenters. Council will hear. Okay. Council will hear first from those who are in favor of the proposed bylaw and those opposed, and anyone who wish to be heard. Presenters typically have up to 5 minutes to present unless there is an applicant, and in which case they have 10 minutes to present, and council will have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification. When you are presenting, please ensure that the microphone and audio is working and state your full name for the record before beginning your presentation. Your time will start when your presentation starts, and you'll be provided with a warning when you have 1 minute remaining. Once you have completed your presentation, please remain at the microphone as council may wish to ask questions following your presentation. Once council has heard all the presentations, the public hearing will be closed and the regular session of council will reconvene so council may make the decision on the matter. Finally, the city's public hearings are recorded as a webcast, which will be made available for viewing on the city's website. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So we'll begin with administration with their presentation on the medical cannabis production. Your microphone is on, ready to go. So please state your name before you begin and just for the record, and when you're ready, please.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Ingram. I'm the Senior Development Planner here at the City of Beaumont, and with me is Sean Hipkiss. He's the Manager of Development Services. Thank you, Your Worship and members of Council and the public. We are here today to present second and third reading of Bylaw 1042-23. This bylaw would amend the land use bylaw to introduce 2 new uses: cannabis production and processing, and medical cannabis production. This will also implement new use standards to address and mitigate land uses and nuisances related to medical cannabis growing. Before I get into the proposed amendments of the land use bylaw, it's important to highlight the big picture approach and the higher orders of regulation. that provide direction on how we want our communities to grow. For ease of terms, I'll be referring to the Municipal Development Plan as the MDP and the Land Use Bylaw as the LUB. We'll start at Council's strategic plan. This plan envisions Beaumont's near and future visions. As Beaumont continues to grow, so do the needs of the community. One of the 5 aspirations in this plan states future-proof growth for a safe, inclusive, and vibrant community. The proposal before you tonight meets this aspiration by providing a forward-looking regulation to serve and meet the needs of the community. The next higher-level document is Beaumont's MDP. This plan is a guide that establishes policymaking in making sustainable and responsible development decisions for future land use and growth in Beaumont. There are 6 overarching policy themes within the MDP, and this proposal before you tonight complies with the following: healthy, vibrant communities, responsible development, and safety and emergency management. The last document I want to highlight is the LUB. This bylaw is a land use mechanism that implements the policies set out in the MDP through regulations and land use districts. We want to ensure that the bylaw remains current, continues to provide flexibility, and is responsive to the needs of the community. The proposed amendment before you will keep up with the trends by adding 2 new land uses and implementing use standards. For background, in the fall of 2022, Council directed administration to prepare a report on options for amending the land use bylaw to provide for more options on how to mitigate nuisances related to medical cannabis growing. On June 27th, 2023, Council approved that administration proceed with taking the necessary steps to implement option 3, which was to prohibit medical cannabis production in residential land use districts, but allow medical cannabis production as a permitted use in other land use districts. On December 12th, 2023, administration presented first reading of this bylaw. As part of this process, administration consulted with legal counsel to prepare the proposed amendments that you will see before you tonight. The proposed amendments, as I mentioned, will introduce 2 new uses in the LUB: cannabis production and processing use, and medical cannabis use. I'd like to provide the definition of both and provide a few specific details. The definition of the cannabis production and processing use is a development where the primary purpose of the facility is the production and distribution of cannabis that is authorized by provincial and federal legislation. This use does not include retail store cannabis or any other cannabis related uses. This type of use will produce and distribute cannabis in a more of a means of a commercial large scale operation. Before you tonight, we are proposing that this not be permitted in any land use district. The definition of medical cannabis production is the growing of cannabis for medical purposes by a registered patient, designated person, or responsible adult who is registered with Health Canada to grow cannabis for their own medical purposes, their designated persons, and their responsible adults, and complies with the cannabis regulations, specifically Part 14, and the definitions of the registered person and designated person. Medical cannabis production shall not include cannabis production and processing use. To provide a bit more context on this type of use that we are proposing, this will be intended for individual production pursuant to a patient or a designated person that has a federal medical license. We are proposing that this use is permitted in the Agricultural Holdings District and the Business Light Industrial District. It will not be permitted in any of the primarily residential or commercial districts. And the main differences between the two are at the scale of operations in which they will function. So the cannabis production processing use, that is your large scale facility or factory that will produce and distribute cannabis. An example of this would be Aurora Cannabis, whereas your medical cannabis production use is grown for the individual for their personal use or their designated or a designated person, as long as they're permitted for that. So an example of this would be John Doe growing for himself or somebody that he's federally medically licensed to. In addition to the two new land uses, I'd like to introduce the use standards for medical cannabis production. This will be intended to address and mitigate land use issues that are associated when somebody applies for a permit. A requirement for proof of and compliance with federal licensing. No more than one federal license is permitted per parcel of land. Details of location of production and odor mitigation strategies are required. A development permit shall only be valid for 1 year. Production must occur within a building and shall not be visible to the public. And 100-meter setback from schools, early learning, childhood services, home education programs, playgrounds, and parks is required. Administration determined that no parking requirements would be established for this use. And as part of this process, the notice of public hearing was posted in the Beaumont newspaper on January 5th and 12th, as well posted on Beaumont's website on January 5th. Administration does recommend second and third reading to bylaw 1042-23 to proceed with the amendment of the land use bylaw to introduce the two new uses, cannabis production and processing, and medical cannabis production, as well as implementing use standards to address and mitigate land use issues and nuisances related to medical cannabis growing. This concludes my presentation, and I would welcome any questions of council regarding this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Ingram. Appreciate the presentation and the update on the bylaw amendment this evening. Any questions from council for our presenters from administration before I move on to the public engagement section of the public hearing? I know Councilman Newkirk, I know you've joined us now, so welcome, Steve. Any questions from you or Kathy remotely?
None from me, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, you're good?
I'm good for now.
Thank you. All right. No further questions from members of council, administration. Thank you for presentation. And move on to the public engagement portion of our public hearing. And that is to invite anybody who wishes to speak in favor of the proposed bylaw amendment is welcome to come forward, identify yourself at this time and speak for up to 5 minutes, please, on this particular topic. Welcome, Ms. Willis.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, administration, and members of the public. I think before I begin, I think I need to have something clarified with our clerk. To my knowledge, two letters or two submissions have been made regarding this issue. And she mentioned just a few minutes ago, they only received one. So I don't know if they received mine or the other one.
Madam Clerk, I know we did receive a letter that had a number of residents sign it. It wasn't individual, it was a number of residents.
Okay.
Are you referring to one just from yourself personally?
And so you got the right one.
Okay.
Mine was sent through an email that was made available through the newspaper article. I never got an acknowledgement that it was received, and I just assumed it had been.
Okay.
So if you'd like me to,
Yes, please forward
read
it to
it?
us for the
Okay.
record after the fact, but please speak to it now while you're here, please.
for sure.
Thank you.
As a resident of Beaumont, I wholeheartedly support the amending bylaw 1042-23 medical cannabis production. I have had personal and ongoing contact with residents of a Beaumont neighborhood immediately impacted in the most negative of ways by a licensed medical cannabis grower. As the seniors rep on the RCMP Community Advisory Committee for several years, I was approached by residents completely at their wits' end, trying to find an agency, law enforcement, or legal avenue to intervene on their behalf to stop this activity on their street or on any other in Beaumont. At the time, there were none. In the intervening years, council and administration have introduced several approaches to control or eliminate this particular grower's activity to no avail, despite what I perceive to have been very best efforts. And I, as well as several residents, do recognize and appreciate those earnest approaches to a very difficult problem. Land use bylaw, amending bylaw 1042-23, medical cannabis production, appears to be the answer to prohibiting this and other growers from continuing or setting up in the first place. Thank you for allowing public input on this subject and on this bylaw.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Any questions for our presenter on being in favor of the bylaw? None being. Thank you for coming. We do appreciate the
Judge.
feedback and the letter from both yourself and also the group of individuals who sent a letter in for support of the bylaw. Much appreciated. Thank you very much. Seeing no other people at present time speaking in favor of the bylaw, I'll close that part of the public hearing. The next part of the public hearing is anybody who wants to speak to be opposed to the proposed bylaw amendment, pardon me. There's nobody in the room who wants to speak against it, so I have to ask formally. And one last thing on public hearing, and anybody who deems himself to be affected by this bylaw amendment who wishes to speak to council in chambers at this time. There's nobody here, but I have to ask the question anyhow. So with that, I believe, Madam Clerk, that does conclude our public hearing. I will now declare the public hearing closed at 6:40. I'll now entertain a motion from member of council for second reading of the proposed bylaw amendment. Once Madam Clerk has it on the screen, is a member administrator or a member of council willing to move second reading as on the screen? Councilor Cook, Kat, you have the floor.
I move that bylaw 1042-23 land use bylaw amending bylaw be given second reading.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you wish to speak to the bylaw at this point? If you can, if you want to, or any other members of council, have any questions or concerns on the proposed bylaw amendment? Not this time, Kat. That's fine. Councilor McCosk-Swain, Sam, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. I got a couple of questions here. So I'll ask our friends from administration to be ready to jump in here. So of the two new uses, I understand the cannabis production and processing piece. You mentioned the facility west of us, and I don't think, while we're looking for economic development, I don't think that's something that we are looking for here. So no problem there. The question I had is just a clarification around the medical cannabis production. And there are some very specific legal terms in here that is obviously being defined for a reason. So I just want to understand what I think the intention of this means. From my understanding, it is legal to grow up to 4 plants in your house. In this section, we talk specifically about medical cannabis production. Is there a difference between someone a medical cannabis production, so me who needs to go and get a federal license to go with that, versus my colleague here who just might want to grow 4 plants? Is there a distinction in the bylaw between this? Could you just speak to that, please?
I'm not sure which microphones are close down there. Mr. Hipkiss, there's a microphone there.
This bring come from.
Yeah, the microphone's on there now, Ms. Engler, for you.
Thank you, to your worship, through to Councillor Munkoff-Swain. Thank you for the question. So in terms of the larger scale production, yes, you hit the nail right on it with that. And then in terms of actually non-medical cannabis versus medical, non-medical, you can grow up to 4 plants on your own without a license. Anything more than that, you do require a federal license. So then that's a personal medical license that you would hold and obtain by the federally.
Sure. Yeah. So in my weird scenario here, my colleague here can still, for personal use, grow up to 4 plants. And maybe I should point over to the mirror. Sorry.
I could use it.
Can grow up to 4. Yeah, you've had enough pain. Grow up to 4 through personal use, but medicinal use gives you an ability to grow more than 4. Is that the distinction I understand?
Yeah, and adults growing cannabis for non-medical uses, you can grow up to 4 plants per household.
Okay, thanks. This has been a while back since we went through this in detail, and I lost the vote 6-1 just for the record back then. So this makes the sense. I just curious on. Then the follow-up is, so we are permitting this medical cannabis production in our agricultural holdings district, as well as the business light industrial district. Presumably enough to keep this away from residents is ultimately is what we're trying to do, right? We heard the nuisance. We've spoken to many residents about one particular house. So that's the intention there, is to allow it. So I guess my question is, why does administration distinguish the difference between the production, so the big, large scale, versus the medical cannabis? Like, just help me understand why we would allow one. Is there a volume issue here? Like, maybe just help me understand how we'd allow one and not the other.
Yeah, thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Munkoff Swain. So when we were looking at how we can implement this in the land use bylaw, it varies from other municipalities and regions all across Canada. And the common theme we were noticing is the larger scale production were starting to be implemented in their land use bylaws, but this was very specific. This was a different scale of operation where it's not that big factory that could take up acres and acres. This is personal medical cannabis for an individual use, or be a designated grower, and it's a much smaller scale production. And then in terms of permitting it within the business, light industrial and the agricultural district, through conversations with administration and legal counsel, we came to terms with those districts because of the proximity to predominantly residential districts in Beaumont and neighborhoods. But in addition, I just want to mention that we, as part of the whole process, they will have to submit odor reports and monitoring reports, and there will be requirements that they need to make sure that they're mitigating those. But going back to the question, yeah, it's we wanted to have two different uses to deal with the large scale and the smaller scale. And make sure that there was enough of a buffer in between the residents that it wasn't going to create a nuisance.
Okay, that's great. And I think to the heart of this is I didn't quite, and sorry if it's in here. I couldn't see it and didn't have time to look it up. I didn't get a good understanding of the difference of the scale between the two. So I don't know if you know that off the top of your head. Like, can a personal medical cannabis production for a patient or designated person, is there a limit on size up to there? Like, could I get a medical license and then grow an acre? Like, is there a distinction within the federal legislation there?
Sure.
I'm trying to make sure that we've got the intent here, right? That if someone applies that and we still end up with the same problem, that we don't want the large production facility, but we still might. So is there?
Mr. Hipkiss?
Yeah, I can hopefully respond to you on that. You have individuals that are, you have like, again, your kind of your for-plant kind of a stage. And then you jump into your medical licensing kind of side is really it's more to the individual. It's geared towards, not the business, where if you look at Aurora large growing operations, they're a large ag setting in a kind of like a large greenhouse kind of a establishment, where these licenses would really kind of scale down. The medical side scales down to the individual and really fits towards their purpose, or if they've been designated by the federal government, other individuals as well.
Is there, I guess maybe I'll try to answer this a different way, and appreciate you've got multiple people talking to you, so that's tough. Is there a difference between, when I read this, again, without looking at the legislation, a difference between cannabis production processing facility where your intent is to distribute and sell it versus a personal one where you use it yourself? Is that the distinction?
Yeah, so from the largest scale, you can sell it.
Okay.
The license is still for the individual use for a medical purpose.
Okay.
Right. So that's kind of the difference is there's no, it's not supposed to be used for revenue.
Yeah, perfect. Sorry.
Or distribution.
If someone needs a personal use for an Aurora size, then let's probably have a conversation around that. But this makes all the sense in the world to me. And sorry for the questions. I didn't quite understand the legal distinction between it and recognize that this is a tough piece of legislation that you guys are having to navigate. I do have one other question, if you don't mind.
Please.
Just on the enforcement. So this is within our bylaw, right? So take out the cannabis production and processing. You know, we just wouldn't allow that. So that's fine. But from what I understand here, because this is within our bylaw, so this just comes down to municipal enforcement. If we think that someone is growing cannabis for medical purposes, but hasn't come to us to get a permit to be able to do that, and excuse me if permit's the wrong word, but to get what they need in order to be able to do that, that's a municipal enforcement issue versus a federal RCMP issue. I'm just trying to understand what the enforcement impact of putting this bylaw in.
Thank you. So through your worship to Councillor Monkoff-Swain, yes. So the enforcement piece, with it being in the land use bylaw, the development authority becomes the enforcement mechanism, and we work in conjunction with municipal enforcement. And through that process, we would be issuing a stop work order or stop order on that property to seize the operation immediately and then follow the process.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking is just the challenge that we had with this one particular spot is we didn't know who had control, who could do what, right? So
Yeah.
I think this is clear to me. It's a well thought out bylaw. Apologies for all the additional questions around it, but this makes all the sense in the world to me. So I'll be voting in favor of this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor Penrod, followed by Councillor Telebas, followed by Councillor McCook. Phil, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mayor Donald. So again, thanks for your presentations, Mr. Hipkiss and Ms. Ingram. I do just actually want to dig in a little bit on the first piece where we've defined cannabis production and processing, and then not allowed it. So forgive me, this isn't a file that I followed closely before I was elected. And so I did my best to read up on it now, but I would just like a little bit more color on, and maybe I'll start here. Actually, I'm looking at a map here that looks a little bit like this. And I'm just wondering if you can tell me the difference, if there is any, between agriculture holdings district as a land use designation and agricultural reserve as it's designated on this map.
Ms. Ingram?
Thank you, Your Worship, to Council. That map, so within the land use bylaw, agricultural holdings district is one land use district. That map right there, I think that is the municipal development plan. They might not cross the exact boundaries of the agricultural holdings district that's within the land use bylaw. Those are probably, so the map that you have before you shows the annexation lands. Most of those lands are slated for or are designated as our agricultural holdings district. Yes, so your question, you wanted me to walk you through the process as well as to how we came up with.
So
With our
just starting there, that
recommendation.
helps give me a little bit of clarity. My second question is, how does, if we bring this bylaw into place as prepared and proposed by administration, how will that situate Beaumont compared with our neighboring municipalities?
So thank you, Your Worship, through to councils. So once this becomes part of the land use bylaw, it will run with the land and it will be in effect. So anybody who wishes to apply for a medical cannabis production permit, they'll have to go through the proper chains and apply for the development permit. In terms of our regional, our neighbors, a majority of them, when we were researching this, they do not define that in their land use bylaw. Leduc County did define the large cannabis facility, but they did not define this small scale production. Actually, throughout most of our findings across Canada, very few municipalities even walked that line to incorporate within the land use bylaw. So how it will affect adjacent surrounding municipalities, I don't think that this will affect them. This is primarily within Beaumont, the lands within Beaumont. And if somebody does want to apply for a large scale production facility, they would have to go through the proper channels of applying for land use bylaw amendment. Then they would come to present to council, go through this very same process. And then it would be up to council to decide whether they approve or refuse it. So.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, then our neighbors have not disallowed this as a use. And so I just wonder if you can give me a little bit of history and color on why we've decided to take that action as a municipality. Again, as Councillor Monkoff-Swain mentioned earlier, we are actively looking for commercial development, and it sounds like this is one area that we're maybe not interested in. Just wondering if you can give me some color and background on that.
Yeah, through your worship to council. So when we were looking, when we were directed by council to look into this, one of the factors that kept popping up is we wanted to deal with the smaller scale personal medical use. Our focus was not for the large scale production, but when we were looking and seeking legal counsel, they advised us that it would be a good approach to incorporate both of the uses within the land use bylaw, but council and administration's primarily focus was the small scale production as for an individual. For the individual or for a registered persons to be able to grow for them.
Sure. So to be clear, I'm in support of what you've developed here for us for the medical cannabis production piece, especially with the clarification my colleague was able to get around that designation. Again, this is not an issue I follow super closely, but I did want to make sure that we weren't disallowing people from just growing for their recreational use as they're allowed under the law, right? The general spirit of what I'm trying to come to here is how can we make sure that neighbors aren't impacting neighbors in a negative way, while at the same time kind of regulating as little as possible what otherwise is allowable under the federal law. And so that's where I'm coming at with these questions, specifically focused on the larger production and processing facility. We've gone out of our way to define that, but we've also gone out of the way to communicate to everyone that wants to read the bylaw that we're not interested in this. There's no land available here for this. And if you wanted to propose it here, I guess, I don't know why you would, because other neighboring jurisdictions don't have this disallowed. So maybe that business just goes elsewhere. Maybe we've thought that through and thought other jurisdictions have had issues with this, or maybe just as a unique community, that's a business we're not wanting to get into. But in the spirit of only disallowing things that are otherwise legal, when there's really good reason to do so, I'm just curious if you can give me some color on why we're opting to take that extra step.
Oh, Madam Clerk, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may suggest, maybe we might want to go into closed session to discuss and help provide clarification to Councillor Penrod in his questioning.
Okay, if that's the advice of administration, that's what we'll do. So I'll entertain then a motion to move into closed session to answer the question as best we possibly can. Hang on, Phil, I'll get there in a second. I gotta get the motion on the screen first.
I just wonder, Mayor, if it makes sense for me to move the motion.
You probably can. Anybody can move it. Yeah. Let's take a second. Have Madam Clerk put a motion on the screen for us to move into closed session. Your question will be in open session when I get back. You're next on the list to speak, and then Councilor Cook. Councillor Penrod, would you please move that we move into closed session as per the motion on the screen, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that council move into closed session at 6:58 pursuant to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, sections 24.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion. Oh, Councillor McCook. Discussion on the motion. Hang on a second, I got too many mics on here. Hang on. Councillor McCook.
I'm just wondering, Mayor, if it makes sense to potentially have some of our questions answered that could be done in open session before we move into closed. Would that make sense, or?
So there's no
Or do you wanna
there's no
bounce
right
back
or
and
wrong,
forth?
actually. I'd rather stay on the same topic. Deal with the topic at hand and come back out of closed session and deal with the balance of the questions, please. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any further questions on the motion? Seeing none. Council, would you please vote on the motion to move into closed session? Councillor Barnard, how do you vote?
I'm in favor, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Van Newkirk, how do you vote?
In favor, Mayor.
Thank you. That carries unanimously. Thank you, council. Well, now we move to closed session. I'll have to have our guests please depart, and we'll call you back in when we're done. If you want to continue with the balance of the conversation, you're welcome to join us again in open session. Thank you. We are back live after our closed session, and we'll continue our discussion on this medical cannabis production amending bylaw 1042-2. Our next counselor to wishing to ask questions is Councilor Natelabas. Nathan, you have the floor. Okay, I got the mic for you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I guess just a couple of questions. My first one is just going to surround permit requirements. So anyone that has ever visited a grow up or seen any of that, there is a lot of moisture that grows within the house, eventually leading to mold, and a lot of houses are often condemned as a result of that issue. What are the permit requirements in terms of the facility itself?
So through your worship to council, this is in relation to the medical cannabis production. So the use standards, the minimum requirements that we will be ensuring that they comply with is the proof and compliance with the federal licensing. The only one license per parcel of land will want to know the details of the location. They'll have to provide odor mitigation, and that could provide that could be strategies or studies required. And then depending on where it is in location of the land, we want to make sure that it's not visible to the public, and then that 100-meter setback. So those are the regulations that we have been recommended by legal counsel. And then in terms of applying for electrical permits or plumbing or gas, they would have to still maintain and require those. And in terms of moisture in the building, that would fall under Alberta Building Code. Yeah, I'm going to pass this along to Mr.
Here, I hopefully can help elaborate a little bit further. You probably would be looking at, Alberta Health would be probably more the ones leading that. From a buildings code side of thing, I don't think they can do much from that perspective, because again, they don't have anything in their codes that really can change ventilation on those aspects. But so you're right. Turning a house into a greenhouse is got its challenges, which is some of the aspects of why we're looking at how we handle this. Generally, when you start looking at moving it to your light industrial and your ag areas, it is more equipped for those kind of handlings and less into the residential side of things. So I would, that kind of that direction of where you're going with kind of the lands there, Councillor Penrod and Natelabas. That's kind of the where planning kind of looked at and said, okay, well, where would you have potentially suitable buildings that may have some operational needs that could fulfill that? Hopefully that elaborates a little further.
No, I mean, it does, but I don't like the term hopefully, because that's concerning. So in terms of the permitting on the development side, I would like to know that there's a plan in place to make sure that we have appropriate measures to mitigate that we have the HVAC systems in place. Because it's no different than, it's probably quite fitting right now, but opening a hot yoga studio and not having an HVAC system, right? Like it's just eventually going to destroy the facility, and it's no different than a house.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Natellenboss. The building code does have HVAC capabilities in it for when you're doing alterations. So again, I guess when I use the word, hopefully I was misspoken on that term, and I'm sorry to do that. The building code does require you to meet certain requirements with the building size and use when it becomes commercial. I think the challenge becomes is that with a individual license, it's not commercial. So then you kind of fall back into that gray zone on that piece of it. So by steering them in that without stepping into other provincial regulations and codes, we are leading them down a path where it would be an effective measure to keep them in those areas and limit impacts to housing.
Perfect. Thank you. And then I guess just another question. So when we refer to the medical growing term or the concept we kind of used was for personal use and individual use. But I feel like this is an opportunity for a loophole to exist in the system, and I become a designated grower. How many people can I grow for as a designated grower? Like what exactly does that look like?
Ms. Dargy or Ms. Ingram?
Thank you, Councillor Natellenboss, for that question. That is determined by the federal license, so it's not something that the municipality determines. The information that we've had, it looks like you can grow medical cannabis for up to 3 or 4 people. And each of those licenses can have upwards of around 100 to 150 plants.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for your answer. So I guess that's the concerning part. I guess just to kind of end off here, sorry, I lost my train of thought here for a sec. Yes, so in terms of enforcement, so we run into an issue down the road where we have 450 plants being grown at a facility. What options do we have? And it's obviously interrupting the neighborhood and causing some issues. What options do we have if we were to go ahead and approve this bylaw to try and mitigate some of those issues?
Through your worship to council. So we would make sure that they would have a valid permit. And in terms of the number of plants, we would make sure that they would show us proof and compliance with that. It would include the quantity of how many plants they're allowed to grow for. And as long as they're within those parameters, we can't really do much. If they are working outside of their permit conditions, then we can issue fines, violation tags. We can go all the way to the stop order. So we have those different mechanisms, but as long as they're working within the parameters of their federal license and they're in compliance with their development permit conditions, there's not a lot of other course of action. One thing I just want to note is that we have in the use standards indicated that these development permits will be valid for 1 year. So if council or if we reassess, we can always change, we can always amend the bylaw, and we can always revoke their license if they are not in compliance with their permit. If it does come to that 1 year and they do expire, they'll have to reapply for a brand new application. And if we do change the bylaw within that time frame, well then they will have to make sure that they're in compliance with those new bylaw regulations. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. And Mayor, if I can ask one more question. And then
Quick one.
Okay, thank you. In terms of odor mitigation, obviously there's a few ways to control that Exhaust is obviously one, but making sure it doesn't interrupt other areas. What are some of the solutions that we would consider as acceptable for mitigation strategies for reducing odor?
Yeah, so through your worship to council, those details haven't exactly been determined yet. We know that there's odor mitigation strategies that we need to look into in terms of proper ventilation, making sure that it's not creating a nuisance. There's a little bit more background information that we need to dive into as administration to really determine what those strategies are going to look like, but those would all be conditions of the development permit. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor McCook, followed by Councillor Barnhart. Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this, I just really want to highlight and just for the councillors that weren't here when we had these prior conversations, this is one of those really difficult circumstances where we have overlapping jurisdictions and policies and whatnot, which makes it all the more complicated and has really kind of, as we've spoken about before, tied kind of municipalities' hands as to what we can put in and what we can't. So we really pushed administration to try and find some solutions, and this is kind of what we have in front of us. So I just want to applaud admin for the work that's gone into this. I just have one quick question, but lots of great questions leading up to get some good clarification on this, as it is a complicated issue. Mine is the 100-meter setback from playgrounds and schools and whatnot. Just where did that number come from, and is that kind of the standard, or?
Yeah, so through your worship to council, thank you. So this regulation, it came from a couple of different places. Within the provincial regulations that were established from private cannabis stores, they determined a 100-meter buffer between cannabis retailers, schools, and provincial health centers to keep cannabis out of the hands of children and protect public health. So that's where that came from. We also in our land use bylaw have a restricted substance use that can be referred to as like a cannabis retail store. And we have regulations set forth that have a 100-meter buffer from any schools, education uses, day centers, anything like that. So that's kind of where that regulation came in, is that we thought it would complement our land use bylaw with our existing use, and that it was also provincially regulated as well. So we wanted to be consistent there.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ensure that that it was enough, and that so thank you for the clarification as to where it came from. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor, Kathy.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thanks to everyone. Really good questions, and lots of thought has gone into making this bylaw and this amendment. It's challenging. It's very challenging, and I think we're going to learn as we go. That's my question, and I'm trying to recall when we crafted the original bylaw. Is there a time period when we will be able to see how this is going and get a report back from the administration, or will we need to request that ourselves, or is it built into the bylaw that we'll be coming back and looking at this at all after a period of time?
Mr. Hipkiss?
Through to the chair, thank you, Councillor Barnhart. We can add this into our yearly bylaw monitoring report that we do and provide to council. So we can add it there, and we can have see where we have success or challenges.
I would really appreciate that, because I do think we're breaking new ground. That's been said, and I totally agree. There may be things we just haven't anticipated. We could end up with unexpected consequences that we really need to consider making adjustments. So I'll vote in favor of it at this point, but I would like to see it come back with some report on how things are going.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, administration. Made a note of that for their review about a year from now on the Spectre bylaw. Thank you very much. Are you anything else, Kathy?
No, Mayor, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, I can't see you on the screen. You have any questions, Steve?
None, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. That concludes all of our questions. So at this point, I'm prepared to move to the vote on second reading. Council, would you please vote on second reading as per the screen motion we've already gone through? Councillor Barnard, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Van Newkirk, how do you vote?
In favor.
We just voted and we voted unanimously to pass the second reading. Okay, so, okay. We now move on. Madam Clerk, there's a suggestion for a possible amendment. Can we move third reading first and then, or what's the procedure now to on this? This caught me by surprise. So can you advise on procedure, please? Madam Clerk,
Thank you, Mayor. You can do an amendment in third reading.
we can in third reading?
Mhm.
Okay, that's what I thought. Just want to get it clarified. So I will ask we put on the screen motion for third reading, and then we'll ask for discussion at that point. Member of council willing to move the motion for third reading? I'll move it myself then, that I move that bylaw 1042-23 land use bylaw amending bylaw be given third reading. Okay, the motion has been made for third reading. Is member of council willing or opening to discuss third reading? Councilman Natalibus. Nathan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just hoping to make a slight amendment to reduce the areas to just light industrial district.
Okay, we'll have Madam Clerk draft that amendment, and then we can discuss it. You can move it once it's been drafted, and we can discuss it. Okay. Administration, well, Madam Clerk is drafting that amendment. Is it possible if we have access to a map that shows the two areas that would be affected by this bylaw amendment? We can see what's being taken away. Is that possible, Ms. Raymond? Okay, so we'll take a moment here and have that map available for us to have a look at. Madam Clerk.
Mayor, I'm wondering procedurally if it's actually better to refer it back to administration for the amendment, or else we're going to have an additional public hearing with regards to this bylaw.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Just to make sure I got it clear in my mind what we need to do
If the
here.
amendment passes, we're going to need to redo a public hearing. So I'm wondering if it would be better to refer it back to administration to bring back.
At a later time? Well, I'm not sure what's the best way to go, actually. My gut tells me that I'm not going to vote for it personally, I'm not sure I'd be comfortable supporting the amendment. So, Mr. Schwartz, do you want to weigh in on this situation, please?
Well, further to what Ms. Winter is suggesting, if this amendment passes, we would want to run this by legal to assess the potential extra risks that we're facing.
Right. So part of me says if the amendment doesn't pass, it becomes moot and we go on to third reading. If amendment doesn't pass, nothing changes. If amendment passes, we've got to go back to legal. And am I missing something, Madam Clerk?
My suggestion.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to make sure we get it right and do the most expediently way and make sure we get it correctly. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We would still need to re-advertise the bylaw, but I am going to refer to legal with regards to whether or not sending it for legal review.
Ms. Darjay? Yeah. Just give me a second here, guys.
We can defer to Ms. J.
Ms. Bujia, do you wish and join our conversation, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, council. I think if council would like us to pursue making that kind of change, because we are talking about a substantive change to the bylaw, it would be best to refer the change, the possible amendment to administration, so that we could do two things. We would look at it legally, do a legal review of that change, and then we would also have to re-advertise because it is a substantive change to what's before council.
So that sounds a bit, our Director of Legislative Services said we should probably refer it back to administration. So having said that, Ms. Pujaya or Madam Clerk, how do we do this now? Do we have to do a motion to send it back to administration or simply direct it accordingly and we don't have third? But we have third reading, the motion's made, so I don't know how to get out of this quagmire.
Mr. Mayor, may I chime in? I'm sorry, I may have led you astray. So you can have a referral motion and anyone who supports making that change to the bylaw could vote in favor of the referral motion. If you do not vote in favor of the referral motion, then third reading is available and you can proceed with third reading.
What I sort of thought, it becomes moot then. Okay, that clarifies things for me. Appreciate that. So I will ask then for a referral motion to be drafted by Madam Clerk. And then we'll re-clarify that if you're voting in favor, Madam Clerk, you wish to wade in.
Thank you, Mayor. If we can just have a quick 5-minute recess and I'll
Well, I'm
get
going to
this.
suggest that you want to take a 5-minute break. Actually, we'll take 10 minutes, it's 7:30 anyhow.
Thank you.
We'll take a 10-minute break, then we'll come back with that referral motion and we'll proceed from there. So we are adjourned till 7:40. Thank you very much. Okay. We're live. Thank you very much. We're back after our break and our clerk had a chance to draft the referral amendment. Let's have a quick look at it here. Referral motion. Okay, the referral motion is on the screen before us. Is a member of council willing to move the referral motion as presented on the screen? Councilor Telebus, I'm going to go to you on this one.
Thank you. I'd like to move that bylaw 1042-23 land use bylaw amending bylaw be referred back to administration for further amendments to remove medical cannabis production from the agricultural holdings.
Thank you. Please speak to your motion. If you wish to at this
Yes,
point.
absolutely. Is there any way that administration could bring up the plot plan or the map there that was up previously? Perfect, thank you. So unless I stand corrected, the agricultural section would be the area in green, correct? And the light industrial would be the area in purple? Yeah, perfect. So I guess my concern is if you look at all of the real estate that surrounds Beaumont, we've already seen issues in the past with growing marijuana. Although this is relating more to the medical side of things, there is the potential for individuals to potentially abuse this permit and grow for others as well. So I just want to make sure that the community is protected. And I think the best bet is limiting the areas where we allow for this production to occur, whether it's personal use or I believe the term was a designated grower for others. And I think by, again, reducing the surface area where we're allowed to put up these shops or, pardon me, these facilities will help better protect the community.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councilor Monkhouse-Swain, followed by Councillor Penrod. Sam, you have the floor on this one.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for bringing forward the motion. I won't be supporting this, just, choose my words, try to carefully here. So I understand what you're trying to do here. Again, we're trying to move this forward to look after the best interests of our residents. I get that, but we also have a job to protect Beaumont. And I think part of this option, going with this recommendation to remove everything from green and narrowing it down to only in purple, opens us up to significant risk. Like the federal government has deemed this legal. And if we say these are the 4 buildings that you can do it in, and if these are already rented, then we're severely limiting someone's ability to do this. And so my recommendation, or where I go, is to leave it as admin's recommendation here to include both of them. They're going to monitor it as we go, as we make our way through this. If we need to make adjustments, we will. But I think they've done a lot of thought on this, both from what's best for Beaumont, but also from a legal perspective. So I don't think we should move forward with this motion. I think we stick with what's in here and vote on the third reading. We didn't hear anyone come in front of us for a public hearing that said anything different. They had multiple opportunity. In fact, we had people vote, share their support for it. So that public hearing matters. and we should take that into consideration as well. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor Penrith, followed by Councilman Newkirk. Phil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I too will be am speaking against this motion and intend to vote against it. Everything Councillor Munkoff Swain, not to reiterate what you just said, but very much in agreement with those factors. The only factor I would add is not wanting to draw out the period any longer before this bylaw can go into effect. And so I read with interest the letters that came in to us earlier today, and then heard again Ms. Willis's letter. And it sounds like these folks have been through the ringer and are very much looking at this bylaw as the light at the end of the tunnel. And so I know it's not perfect, and maybe down the road we can tune it in even better. But for those reasons, I'll be voting against this motion tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councilman Newkirk. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, Mayor, my points were made by Councillors Munkoff, Swain, and Penrod. So thank you. I also will not be supporting this.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Seeing no further comments, I will also not support the motion. I see very little value in this motion if it were to pass in terms of changing those lands for the cannabis, because most of those are going to be future subdivisions, which can be mostly housing. So that's going to create a future problem. So I see no point in wasting resources, administration redoing a bylaw that is, in my mind, as good as it can possibly be. So I'll not be supporting the motion. Councilman Neltelbus, you have a chance to one last comment before I call for the vote.
Yeah, absolutely. It's evident I won't get the support here. I will be voting in favor of if we drop the other proposal, not because I think it's 100% foolproof, but it's better than where we're at now. So.
Okay, seeing no further comments, council, would you put the motion back on the screen, please, Madam Clerk, just so we're clear what we're voting on? I know we are, but just on the safe side. This is the referral motion. Thank you. All right. At this point, I'll call for the motion. I'll call for the vote, please, on the motion before you. Councilor Newkirk, how do you vote?
Not in favor.
Thank you. Councilor Barner, how do you vote?
Opposed?
Thank you. That motion is defeated 6-1. Only Councilor Telebus voted in favor. All right. Motion is defeated. We go back, I believe, now to third reading. At this point, third reading has been moved. Any further discussion on the motion of third reading on the bylaw to amend cannabis use? Seeing no further discussion? Council, I'll ask you to vote on third reading. Councillor Barnhart, how do you vote?
In favor, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Newkirk, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. Council, that carries unanimously, 7-0 in favor of passing the bylaw. Thank you, Council. We'll move on to our next item on our agenda this evening. That was 6.1. We're now at 7.1. Section 3407 in brackets 1, request to waive property tax late payment fees, roll 009394. I believe Mr. DeBlanco, I believe you're joining us this evening remotely as well. Could you please present on this topic, please, when you're ready, Curtis?
Sure. Good evening to the Mayor and Council. I'm Curtis DeBlanco. I'm the Director of Finance for the city. Before Council is a report for a Section 347 request to waive property tax penalties. The report in the agenda package outlines the request as well as Council administration's role in dealing with these requests. Little history here. In 2022, Council adopted Council Policy C50, Property Tax Relief Policy, which guides the process for this. Prior to the adoption of this policy, property owners would have needed to present at Council to make their request. This policy formalizes the process for the requests, where each request comes to Council as an individual report. Property owners are welcome to attend the meeting and present their request as well. Important to note that a cancellation, refund, reduction, or deferral of all or part of property tax impacts all property tax owners because the amounts must be paid up by other owners. So it is imperative Council exercise the authority in an equitable manner. Administration does receive numerous requests to either cancel, refund, reduce, or defer property taxes each year for a variety of reasons. And the instruction administration gives is that administration does not have the ability to grant that. In these situations, administration informs the resident on the opportunity to present the request to Council in accordance with the section of the MGA. Administration would recommend to council to grant a section 347 request if there was an error in fact, either regarding the assessment, calculation, or application of penalties. That is not the case in this instance. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Blanco. I know you're not feeling well tonight, and I do appreciate your being online for us, help us out as we needed it. So Councilor Telebus, you pulled it off consent. I'll give you the opportunity to speak first to this. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. I guess I kind of want to allude to the fact that there's two issues relating to the same matter. So just kind of going over this, I'd imagine everyone had the opportunity to read the emails and what have you, but basically we're looking at a scenario where the individual involved in this claims that they did not receive the initial letter for their property taxes. As such, they didn't pay them on time. As such, it's resulted in penalties. The claim is made that the letter had actually gone to the builder as opposed to the homeowner. And this applies in both scenarios. $300 is the example here, and the fee and penalty that's associated with paying late. I'm not asking for a reduction. I'm not asking for a deferral or a change in the property tax. I'm just asking that we consider this request to waive the penalty because they were not initially aware of it. And it seems like we have a gap in our system, especially if there's a couple of people complaining about the same issue.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Council, I probably should have asked for the motion first and then had you speak to it because I'm assuming you might want to not support the motion. I'm not speaking for you. I'm just saying you might take the position. So I should have asked for the motion first and then asked for discussion on it. I apologize. I'll do the next one the proper way. So I will move that the request for waiving property tax penalty in the amount of $300.89 pertaining to roll 009394 be denied. Having said that, I'll now open up to discussion on the motion. Councillor Telebus, you've already spoken. I'll give you a chance to speak again if you want to. Councillor Penrod, you have the floor, Phil.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to flag a couple additional pieces and then maybe respond a little bit to Councillor Natellenboth's. So thanks first for moving this off the agenda, the consent agenda. I think it's worth having a little bit of conversation around this. I agree with you that I think I'd like to pose to administration. Like we've got a couple issues here, and is this an indication that we have a gap that we could maybe pave over or part of our process that we could improve? On this particular request, it's an open question to me whether the city's at fault here. At fault might be too legal a word, but if we drop the ball here, or maybe the developer dropped the ball as far as forwarding, or certainly the lawyers involved in the transactions too, maybe have a piece. So I think that as I make a decision on this for how to vote, I have to work through in my head, what other opportunities does this resident have, and working through their lawyer who papered the transaction and working with the developer are two other viable options in my mind. The biggest reason I wanted to pull this off the consent agenda tonight was that you mentioned in the report that the section 203 of the MGA prohibits council from delegating this power to administration, the power to review. And then later in the overview of the issue, administration notes that you would never recommend council grant a section 347 request unless there was an error in fact regarding the assessment, calculation of taxes, or application of penalties. And so I wonder if those two they might not be in violation of the letter of the law, but it seems to me that those two factors are a bit in violation of the spirit of it. If ultimately this is supposed to be a power and a responsibility that council holds so that members of the public have the opportunity to make a good faith claim, then would it really be a good thing that we just de facto say no to all of any claims that might be made? And so that's where I think it's worth to at least pull it off the consent agenda. I'm aware that we're maybe opening ourselves up to some issues if, if we say yes to one of these requests, then how do we differentiate between requests? And I understand we have some tricky decisions to make there, but I appreciate the opportunity to open this up and just close again by coming back to my question, and maybe it's the same question that Nathan poses. Is there a way that we can improve our process here, learn from this situation, and hopefully make it better going forward for future residents?
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. DeBlanco, do you wish to comment?
Sure, and thanks for the comments, and I thought it'd be helpful if I just highlighted a few instances here. To Councillor Penrod's questions on, and our friends in legislative will correct me if I'm incorrect here. Correct that it is council's role to make the decision on whether they're applying. The recommendation from administration is with regards to council's policy. So council's policy guides administration to evaluate each of these instances, and then based on the criteria in that policy, make a recommendation back. Once again, it is council's role to exercise that power. With regards to if gaps perceived in the report, the gap is really between the builders and the lawyers in this instance. Administration has the information on file and then mails either the notices or the letters to the address that we have on file. In these instances, yes, the gap would lie between the homeowners, builder, and or lawyers, or both.
Thank you, Mr. Blanco. Appreciate that. Any further comments or questions from members of council? I can't see you, Kathy or Steve. Any questions from you, Kathy or Steve?
No questions, Mayor.
Steve?
Yeah, Mayor, I did have my hand up. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and Mr. DeBlanco kind of hit it on the head for me when he said gap is between builders and lawyers. My point was going to be that any property transactions that I've been part of, the lawyers have dealt with taxes and payment to ensure compliance. And that's just the way it works. So if that was missed somewhere, then clearly the gap is between the builders and the lawyers. So that's the point I wanted to make here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate that. Any further members of council wishing to make any comments? I'll echo the comments of Councilman Newkirk a moment ago, and also Mr. DeBlanco. Administration takes responsibility if we make an error in assessment or error in billing or something like that. Nothing happened in this case. It's between the homeowner who feels they're being treated poorly, and the homeowner and their lawyer and their builder. So I will be voting in favor of this motion to move forward. So seeing no further speakers at this point on this council, I'll ask you to vote on the motion before you. Councilman Newkirk, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor Barnhart. How do you vote?
In favor, Mayor.
Thank you, Council. That carries 6-1 in favor of the motion. Only Councilor Telebas voted in opposition. Thank you, Council. Next on our agenda is item 7.2. Similar items, sections 347 in brackets 1, request to waive property tax late payment fees, roll 009717. Mr. DeBlanco, could you speak this one too, please?
Sure. Yeah, once again, very similar to the past agenda item. Section 347 requests to waive property tax penalties. The roles and responsibilities of council administration are in the report. And then once again, if there was in fact an error on administration's end regarding any of the assessment calculation or application, the recommendation in the report would be to grant the request. Once again, that is not the case in the second instance here.
Thank you. I said I would ask the motion first. I didn't do that second time, did I? Madam Clerk, could you please put the motion on the screen? And I will move that the request for waiving property tax penalties in the amount of $339.27 pertaining to roll 009717 be denied. Members of council willing to speak on this motion? Councillor Penrod, Phil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be speaking against this motion in this case, which might sound surprising being the way I just voted. So for me, the circumstances appear to be materially different in that I think there's a stronger case from this resident that in fact the city did play part of the issue here. It sounds like we may have mismailed the notice. Not our job to dig into that investigatively, I don't think, but reading the letter, I'm always going to presume a resident writes to us or addresses us in good faith. I want to say that they've taken good positive steps to work through the process, and I'm positively disposed to grant their request that these fines be forgiven.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion on the motion? I can't see Kathy or Steve. Any discussion from Kathy or
Mayor, if I may, just to Councillor Penrod's comments, I'm as much as I do take what residents say and believe them, and that they are genuinely believing what they say, without doing investigation, we have one side telling us one thing, one side telling us the other. And I think that's why overall we have been consistently relying on the administration if no mistakes have been made, and we take their word for, because we trust our administration to do that, that if we start saying we don't believe the administration in this hand and we believe the resident, I think we're opening up a huge can of worms. And I know that we've denied others in the past, one we just did tonight, some we've done many before or a few before. I would have a difficult time saying this one we agree with and the other ones we didn't. So I need to be consistent in this one and support the motion as it is written by the mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barnhart. Councillor Newkirk, do you wish to say anything? I can't see you on my screen. Nope.
No, thank you, Mayor. Sorry.
Nathan, you have the floor.
I just think as a general message, I think it's important that we look at every situation on a case-by-case basis. And I don't think that we should have a standardized approach to this. And that's one of the reasons as well that I wanted to take this off the consent agenda. I think it's important we review these. I think it's important we discuss them and we come up with a solution together. I am not questioning administration's ability, but I do know that Canada Post has its issues. I do know that sometimes there's communication issues. I do know that sometimes things get lost in the mail. So I think it's important that we consider those factors when we make this decision. $300 is a lot to some families right now. And our role is to try and find the right reasoning and support decisions that make sense. And this would be another one that I don't support the motion, but I support this individual and the request they're making.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor Penrod, a quick comment before I call for the vote.
Thanks, Mayor. And just responding to my colleague, Councillor Barnhart, very good points. I receive them and take them into consideration as I make my decision. I'm just noting, again, administration's recommendation here that they would recommend council grant a section 347 request only if there was an error in fact regarding the assessment, calculation of taxes, or application of penalties. That list doesn't include the mail issue that's included in this appeal. And so I'm just wondering it doesn't seem like it's covered off under the policy in the same way the previous one was. And so that's where I'm still leaning towards voting to forgive this fine.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. See no further members of council willing to speak or asking to speak on this motion, I will ask council to vote on the motion before you as we had done the previous one. Councillor Barnhart, how do you vote?
In favor, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Van Newkirk, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-2. Councillors Penrod and Telebus opposed. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mr. DeBlanco. Hope you get better soon. Thanks for joining us. I know you were feeling ill, but your expertise was needed in this situation. Thank you for joining us. Next on our agenda, Council, this evening is item 7.3, Council Policy C52, Municipal Grant Funding Program. Joanna, please join us. And when you're ready, please begin. Your microphone is on.
Sure thing. Sorry, I took a look back there. I thought Mr. Suter was going to introduce things. Guess he's letting me run with it. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. My name is Joanna Mancher, Team Lead Arts and Events with the City. It is my privilege to bring forward the proposed policy C52 Municipal Grant Funding Program for your consideration and review. Administration recommends that this policy, as set out in Attachment 1, be approved. and that council policy number C15.1 community grant program be repealed. The topic of how the city manages requests for support for community initiatives was first addressed in the fall of 2022. The findings from this initial review spurred further research and community engagement. Administration returned before Committee of the Whole this past September, presenting a report with details of the stakeholder feedback, cross-jurisdictional review, and analysis of past grant funding allocations, as well as 2 recommended options for how to continue advancing this work. At the heart of the policy before you this evening is the recognition that the efforts by members of the community, be it individual residents, informal groups, and nonprofit organizations, build up Beaumont as a vibrant, strong, and caring community. Addressing the identified opportunities for improvement, this new policy outlines broad eligibility criteria, identifies the types of grants and funding streams that may be available, and the general terms of each funding type. This policy also provides a mechanism for council to annually evaluate support for the arts, as funding allocations for the grant program overall and each funding stream specifically will be set annually. The policy distinguishes 4 funding streams, each with their own focus, yet all together in harmony to advance the city's strategic objectives. The policy provides for the program overall and for each funding stream clarification regarding eligibility, processes, terms and conditions, and responsibility. Administration anticipates the policy will result in efficiencies and improved accessibility, transparency, and consistency for all applicants while reducing risk to the city. The policy identifies terms and conditions that are applicable across all funding streams, and the slide here before you captures a number of the main points. Specifically, I will highlight at this point across all funding streams that council determines the funding allocation to the grant program in its entirety each year through the annual budget process. In tandem with this point, it's important to recognize that it is anticipated that there will be many worthy initiatives seeking support. And such, past funding is not a guarantee of future funding. As well, eligibility does not guarantee funding, nor does it guarantee full funding. Applicants can apply for and receive multiple grants each year. However, each initiative or reason may receive support through one grant program only. It is also important to note that there are combined maximum limits. So there are specific limits for each applicant type. Nonprofit organizations have a set limit, groups, ad hoc groups and collectives have a set limit, and individuals also have a set limit. Across all funding streams, applicants will be required to comply with the outlined terms, conditions, and reporting requirements. And regardless of the funding stream, applications will be assessed on whether or not they meet the grant criteria, how the initiative or request aligns with city plans, the initiative's merit and viability, and consideration will also be given to total past funding. The operating and major project grant stream. Now we'll get into reviewing each stream. First up is the new operating and major project grant stream. And the focus within this stream here is to support nonprofits who can demonstrate sound operations and fiscal responsibility for a minimum of 3 years. The support is primarily geared towards either or both operating expenses and or a major project. The funding is also eligible to be awarded as either a 1-year commitment or as a multi-year commitment. For operating support, arts nonprofits are eligible for up to 100% of eligible expenses. All other nonprofits would be eligible for up to 50% of eligible expenses to a maximum of $50,000 per year. For major projects, all nonprofits are eligible for up to 50% of eligible expenses. Normally, payment would be issued as either one lump sum payment for grants less than $25,000 or in 2 installments for those grants greater than $25,000, 75% upfront, followed by 25% once applicants have submitted required reporting. This grant program is the one stream that requires a 2-stage application. First is an expression of interest submitted in June. Then once those EOIs are reviewed by administration. All eligible applicants will then be invited to submit a full application by September. With the Arts Grant Program, the focus here is to support arts initiatives by organized organized by nonprofit arts organizations, artist groups, and individual artists. The funding is one-time funding awarded in the current year. Applicants may apply for more than one project or initiative. And you can see on the slide the type of limits based on the type of applicant, as well as the payment schedules based on the type of applicant. With the community grant stream, the focus here is to support community initiatives led by nonprofit organizations. And like the arts grants, funding is one-time funding awarded in the current year. Applicants, again, may apply for more than one project or initiative. And the slide indicates the maximum funding limits and payment schedules. The micro grants is a new funding stream focusing on supporting small-scale initiatives led by nonprofits, groups, and individual residents. Like the arts grants and the community grants, the funding for micro grants is awarded in the current year. Applicants may have only one active micro grant at a time, and up to 100% of eligible expenses to a maximum of $1,000. Applicants can be awarded a maximum of 3 micro grants to an overall maximum of $3,000. Payment would be issued to the applicant upon submission of the required reporting. For next steps, should council choose to approve the policy as outlined in attachment 1, the policy would come into effect immediately. The funding allocations for the arts grant program and the community grant program have already been determined through the annual budgeting process that took place at the end of 2023 for the 2024 operating budget. And as such, intake 1 for the 2024 arts grants and community grants would open soon. Intake for the 2025 plus operating and major project grant stream would also open soon, with stage 1 having a deadline in June, stage 2 deadline in September. The determining of the 2025 grant allocations during the annual budget process would afford the opportunity for council to award the 2025 plus operating and major project grants, and also determine the remaining allocation towards the arts grant program, community grants program, and micro grants program. At this time, I welcome the opportunity to address any questions or have further conversations about the report or the policy itself.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. And we do have questions, I'm sure. So we'll begin right off the get with Councilor Telebas, followed by Councilor McCoff-Swain. Nathan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple questions. I know that it mentions here that council has determined the funds through budget. I just want a little clarity. I do understand that we applied funds to the grant funding as a whole, but I don't know that it's been broken down by the groups that we have here. Could I just get a little clarity? Have we already assigned that, or is there room for interpretation through modifying this program here?
Certainly, through the mayor to Councillor Natellenbos. Thank you. That's an excellent question. During the 2024 operating budget deliberations, it was determined and passed that there would be $100,000 set aside for the arts grant program, $70,000 for the community grant program, and there was additional other annual and or multi-year funding agreements that remained in place for consideration and approval. So those amounts were set as part of the operating budget approval process. On a go-forward basis, what the policy would allow for is council to review the entire funding allocation for all grants at once. And when considering the requests through that top stream, the operating and major project grants, those requests are heard before council. Council has the opportunity to determine annual funding or multi-year commitments. And then probably the best way to think about how to approach it would be that administration would present council with last year's funding allocation for as sort of a starting point for next year. So the total funding envelope that was allocated in 2024 would be presented to council for 2025. And then at that point, council would review the requests through the first grant stream. And if council determines that it's appropriate to award greater than what's available now, essentially what that then leaves council to determine is to reduce the amount of funding then left available in the project-based grant streams, arts grants, community grants, micro grants, whether to maintain that or increase the overall funding overall, which of course would then have implications on the tax amount to residents.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So just for clarity, to the best of your knowledge, there's X amount for these initiatives. And then based off of previous budget years, it's somewhat allocated to each group based on, again, the previous year. Am I correct in saying that?
Correct. And thank you for the opportunity to clarify. One way to consider it would be to say for 2025, in 2024, council awarded X number of dollars through what is sort of like the operating major project grants program, although it isn't set up as such currently. Although administration anticipates that those organizations that are currently receiving grant funding would most certainly apply to continue that support through this operating and major project grant stream. Administration anticipates that there would be additional requests coming from established groups that have come forward before council before, as well as organizations that have not presented before council before.
Perfect, thank you. Are you also able to shed some light on why there's such a huge difference in funding for one group versus another? Just running through an example here, 100% funding for arts up to 60,000. Whereas if we go to the other groups, we're capping out at maximum of 20 at 50%. I'm just, looking for some clarification why we treat one group different than the other.
Certainly through the mayor to Councillor Nantellenbos. I can appreciate that at initial look, that does seem, could be interpreted as rather a large discrepancy. However, in line with the policy related to support for the arts, this is one mechanism to make up some ground in terms of where council wishes to be in terms of its support to arts organizations. Funding to arts organizations, artist collectives, and individual artists in this method where up to 100% of eligible expenses could be reimbursed is in line with quite a number of other arts grants policies. At the same token, administration understands that the desire is to support community groups and individuals to become sustainable and move towards self-sufficiency in certain regards. So that is where there is trying to strike a balance between the amount of eligible support available and where priority groups may need to receive additional funding and support compared to other applicants.
Okay, so I guess my question to you is why apply the 50% if you're going to significantly reduce the number? And I say you figuratively, not you yourself. But if that's going to be applied, then and also a reduction in number or total available funds, how come we can't just do 100% to all groups so that we're somewhat more equal across the board? And if we choose to favor the arts program at 60,000, so be it. But it's 100% for all groups. Would there be an issue with that? Obviously, we'd have to reduce the funding on one group to make that happen, but I just think it should be 100% across the board, not half for one group, 100 for another. Just looking, I guess, for your thoughts on making it 100% for each group, so it doesn't appear that there's favoritism for one.
Thank you for the opportunity to address that. I think this would be an opportunity for to consider if there are in fact underrepresented groups or underrepresented initiatives or programming areas that the city has perhaps not been able to fund to the extent that they wish to. It has been highlighted in the past that the city is striving to meet a 3-to-1 ratio in terms of funding allocated to arts compared to sports and recreation. This is one mechanism to address that inequity in terms of financial resources and infrastructure resources.
You good right now?
Yeah, for now, thank you.
Okay, I have Councilman Newkirk, followed by Councilman McCoy-Swain, followed by Councilor Barnhart. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm gonna start down the same train of thought that Councillor Natellenboss was on the 50 versus 100 here. And just maybe just walk us back. Who is deciding on the amounts? Let's start there.
Certainly.
So
Thank
yeah, thank you.
through the mayor to Councillor Ben Newkirk. The amounts were determined by a cross-jurisdictional review, reviewing typical funding allocation, or sorry, I should say percentages of possible support through other grant programs. In a lot of smaller communities, there tends to only be a community grant program, and there often is not distinction between a community grant program and an arts grant program. When there is a distinction, sorry, I'll back up. Typically in those cases, 50% is the number, and that currently is the number that is being used by the current community grant program that the City of Beaumont offers. In terms of offering, including in the policy, administration chose to leave the amount as 100% for the arts groups and the artist applicants based on other policies, other strategic documents and guiding principles that the city has previously identified in terms of addressing the needs from this segment of the group. So as part of the cross-jurisdictional review, there was an assessment of, how other grant policies exist and run, and also taking into account the unique needs that face the residents of Beaumont. So addressing, there are certain gaps in resources that are available to the community, and as such, they may require support that a non-arts group would not require. For example, there is a lack of specifically arts-centered facilities in the community. So there are increased costs related to rental of equipment, travel to other locations, et cetera. So I think that is that's the scaffolding part of where administration came to.
Yeah, no, that's good. And then the next layer here is once a submission is put in, who is deciding on the amount? Is it administration? Is it the committee? Is it council? Just for ultimate clarity here.
Certainly. Currently for 2024, the total funding pot available, if you want to use that word, that's available in the community grant program and the arts grant program, that was already determined during the 2024 budget approval process. The way it will work on a go forward basis is not dissimilar to how it happens now. During the budget deliberation process, council determined the other grant funds that were distributed to other groups. If you recall, there was a presentation before you from the Heritage Society, and it was determined to provide them some additional funding as part of the budget process. In the future, those types of requests would come through this operating and major project grant program. It provides an opportunity for greater transparency and accessibility by groups to come forward and put forward their requests at one time. Council would then determine the amounts awarded to those applicants from that specific grant program only. So the operating and major project grants. Then once that amount is determined, for a lack of better words, you've got your whole pie and you decide how much pie you're giving to those applicants first. And then you decide, council decides how much money to put towards arts grants, community grants, and micro grants. The next step there would then be providing an opportunity for the Arts Advisory Committee to review the applications coming forward for the arts grants. The Grant Funding Advisory Committee would review the applications for the community grants, and administration would review the applications for the micro grants. The arts grants and the community grants would come back before council for with their recommendations and for final approval, not dissimilar to what's happening right now with the existing community grant program. So council decides how much pie to put into the community grant program. The committees decide how to divvy up that remaining slice of pie to all of the applicants and comes back to council for final approval.
Yeah, sorry. I'm looking for a very, very simple answer. So is there still a community committee involved here in this process?
Yes. So
okay. So yeah, that's fine. Just a second. So there's a community. So the application comes in. There's a community committee process. As part of that community committee process, if the application comes in for 10 or 20 or for $10,000, the committee can do like they did in the past and say we authorize 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000. So the committee still has that ability to do that. They consider all the things that they used to consider. And then based upon that decision, it comes back to council, and then, not just like, as you said, not dissimilar to what happened in the past. Then it goes through the council process and budget and the like, right? So what I'm seeing and hearing is lots of flexibility in this program for the committee to throttle up or down the numbers anyways. So I actually don't see the value in limiting and not just putting up to 100% for any of the groups, because ultimately the community committee has already decided in the past, as we've seen, to fund it 50% or fund it 100%, or for all the reasons that they put into the work. So I don't know that this administrative 50 versus 100 is actually going to affect anything. Because they can throttle it up or down. So if we had it at 100, I'm happy with the work that committee has been doing, and their judgment has been sound. So Mayor, I'll stop with that line of questioning, and then I got a couple more here. In the past, there was multiple, I believe I've seen in the past, multiple groups applying for funding through different funding streams for the same event. Did I hear in the presentation that is not going to be possible in this current new version?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. The intention is to have groups, if you want to host an event, you apply to one grant program for support for that event, not multiple grant programs for the same thing.
Okay, yeah, and we will know that because this is all wrapped up together now.
Correct.
Perfect. So it's not one is applying for fencing, one is applying for rentals, one's applying for operational support. It'll all be wrapped up in one spot. So, okay, that's good. And one more, Mayor, is that okay?
Yes, please proceed.
So in the past, we've had significant feedback around the length and rigor and effort required to initiate this process, the form associated with that. Has that form been reworked and simplified?
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Van Nieuwenkerk. Yes, administration is looking to make improvements to that form and specifically reduce, when possible, the number of questions with a balance of capturing the information needed to ensure eligibility and compliance.
Okay, so that work isn't done yet then?
It is in progress, but would be ready and in place for the next intakes for any of the grant programs.
Okay, yeah. What I would say a preference for myself in future would be to have all aspects of a program in front of us to review. So I would have preferentially liked to have seen all of it together, but I understand there's only so much you can get done. But at the end of the day, the feedback from the community is the form had too much rigor and it took too long to do. And I've been part of it and looked at and reviewed, the empty forms and thought, oh my goodness, this is a lot. So I'll stop there, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor Monkoff Swain, followed by Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Penrod. Sam, you have the floor.
Yeah, maybe a couple of points first. You spoke about the fact that we went to a committee of the whole and beat this whole thing up, and we recommended option one, which you've brought in front of us today. And here we go. And recognize that a couple of folks weren't part of that discussion. So just I know it's hard for folks to wind back to September, but we had a lot of these discussions. Just maybe from a time perspective, Mr. Mayor, like I'm certainly in favor of moving forward with this, but if there are a lot more questions, like maybe it's better, do we refer this back to Edmund so that we can move this forward? And we don't need to rehash it all tonight. I don't know how you want to do that, but
no, actually, yeah, you don't read my mind if you don't mind me jumping on that point. I was talking administration back and forth a moment ago. A couple of questions from councillors is almost looking at maybe tweaking the percentages, which we could do. Then we're kind of crafting policy on the fly, which is what we don't want to do. So if there's, I'm trying to put this exactly, if there's consensus to really rework this again, that committee of the whole it should go, and we can have a chance to debate it more fully. I'm not sure I want to change the percentages. I'm happy with the report. It came back the way we wanted it to. I'm happy with that. But if there's consensus from council to go back to this committee of the whole, we can definitely do that. Delay it by a month and they get it going now. I guess the one question I have on that point before I go to you, continue on with your comments, Sam, is if we did that, Joanne, how much would it affect the process? We could bring it back next month, possibly if the agenda has room. I'm not sure it does. But if we went down that path, just for argument's sake, how would it affect the timing of this? Can you give us some advice on that, if you wouldn't mind, as best you can?
Certainly. I very much appreciate the constructive conversation and the debate here. Administration feels that if this were to be referred back to administration for further work, we would certainly welcome that. However, we'd recognize that it would likely result in offering our grant programs at a fairly status quo process for the remainder of 2024. Which would delay the implementation of the operating and major project grant stream until 2025 intake for consideration for 2026. So essentially delaying that major project.
Delayed for a year, basically. Okay. And follow up on that, Sam?
Yeah, to that end, this is always, the first policy was an evolving policy. We've evolved it to here today, right? And if we put this thing, we'll learn, we'll work our way through. And if we need to make amendments to the percentages, then we make amendments as we go. So my strong preference would be to move forward with this tonight, but I thought I'd just interject and see if someone wants to move a motion to refer this back to admin, to dive into this a bit more, then probably better to do that than have everyone go and say all their issues. So I'll pause there.
Actually, I'll back you on that because I do think this will be asked to come back to us, and some council have a chance to review this. I get that, but this is what we asked for. And I think it's worth going for a year. And if we need to adjust the percentages after a year of implementation and feedback from user groups, we can do that. I'm happy with what was presented here. So I would be in favor of moving on this evening. So with that, let you even though comment then before I go to Councillor Barnhart and go down the list of speaking things. So you want anything else you want to back up?
I was
go forward with the question.
One thing I was going to highlight is, and you talk about next steps, and I just really appreciate how you've identified that we're not just going to put this up on the website and hope that people read it. I won't make a comment about our website here, but the fact that not only newspaper, social media, but direct communication to the VCOs, I think that's super important. That this is going to be a difference to a lot of organizations, and especially those who have relied on, I'll say, consistent funding, if I can. And so getting in touch with them directly, as opposed to waiting for them to hear about it and, hey, we never heard, et cetera. So just really wanted to highlight that to say thank you for going that extra step to make sure, because this is confusing. It's a lot of work. It means a lot to these organizations, and everything that you do is appreciated there. So I don't know how you want to move that, how you want to work through this, but I'll leave it there.
No, I appreciate that. And I want to go through the rest of the questions first, and we'll figure out asking for a motion to approve as it is, or a motion to go back to committee of the whole and tweak it and delay it for a whole year, which I'm not, this is what we're looking for. So, sorry, this is what we're asking for. Madam Clerk, do you want to go on before I go to the next speaker, which is Councillor Barnhart?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to just kind of listening to the conversation of one option obviously is referring it back to committee of the whole for council to dive back into the policy and start opening it up again.
Right.
We would be looking at a March committee of the whole. Our committee of the whole in February is completely full. If council's looking at just tweaking a couple of things, we could refer it back to administration with those tweaks and bring it back to a council meeting, go from there. So there's just a couple of options that council can consider, or of course, passing, looking at just putting the motion as is what the council policy as it sits today.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, for clarifying. I appreciate that. Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor. Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor, and good discussion. I appreciate the desire to get this right. And want to say that the administration has done I think, a very thorough job of dealing with all of the ins and outs of it. It's quite complicated and involves a lot of people, and there's been lots of input and feedback to date. So I think this is, it may not be 100% good yet, but I think it's pretty darn close. I just have a question, just for clarification point of view, not a challenge to change anything, but in the details of the policy, it speaks to the ability of an arts collective to access a grant. And Ms. Manchur talks about the fact that if one person lived here, they'd be eligible for a grant. And I just was wondering where that came from. And I just wondered if that's what others are doing, and just give me some reason why, some rationale behind that.
Certainly. Thank you very much for your question through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart. Yes, there is precedent set in other arts grant programs through the province, through municipalities close by, and federally, that they have definitions in terms of what an applicant is, what an individual artist is, what a collective is. And in that interpretation, so for example, for the Ontario Council for the Arts, if there's a collective, they require a certain percentage of that collective group to meet the individual artist requirements as they have outlined. So in essence, that's what that's doing here. We're saying that we would support individual artists that are residents of Beaumont and that meet other criteria as identified. And therefore, if there is a group of artists together, and we've seen this because of where our community is situated, that artist collectives from the Beaumont area are just that, from the Beaumont area. So this would allow for a group that is comprised of a Beaumont resident, a Leduc County resident, a Leduc resident, to apply for funding and do something in Beaumont that benefits Beaumontonians.
Could I just give an example? Would that be something like ice carving, for example, where there's a collective of ice carvers who are doing something and there's a festival or some event?
Certainly. So, there's a group of ice carvers that say, we'd like to display and do a ice carving demonstration in Centreville at the end of February. One ice carver lives in Beaumont and the other 4 are from other places. If that Beaumont resident is the primary applicant and is the primary recipient of the grant dollars, and as long as they meet other eligibility criteria and that application is approved by the appropriate reviewing body, then they could go right ahead and do it.
Thank you very much. That was the only one question that I had, and I'm okay, Mayor, to proceed if you are going to put that motion forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Councillor. Mr. Suter, do you wish to interject at this point? Your mic is on. Hang on, let me get the right mic. I got too many mics on here right now. I have to code 1 or 2. Just give me a second here.
Yeah, good evening,
Yeah,
Mayor and
good,
Council.
Paul.
Thank you. I was doing my best to not weigh in, but I just wanted to highlight a couple points. There's 4 things that went into this policy that you see before you this evening. One was the internal administrative scan that we constantly are looking at tweaking things. We have been doing that for a number of years. It's not a perfect process. It hasn't been. And this is our best effort to date in the last, say, 5 years to clean a lot of it up. Try to make it easier for groups and residents to access the appropriate stream and the appropriate funding mechanism, as well as soliciting feedback during the process to get here. We also brought it to council and committee of the whole, got the feedback, got the recommendation at that time, and that's how we got here tonight. And no, to Councillor Muncroft-Swain's point, it is an evolution, yes, and we will continue to tweak it. I wouldn't want council to get too hung up on those percentages. A lot of those are we've been operating in some cases currently with. So I don't think it's a huge adjustment in some cases, and those can be adjusted after a year if we go through the process. As we do constantly, we evolve. So I just wanted to highlight a couple points, council, for your consideration before you make any decisions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Much appreciated on that. Next on my speaking list is Councillor Penrod, followed by Councillor McCook. Phil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Barnhart, for thanking the folks that have been doing this work, because until your comment, we had missed that piece. And I think there's such an awesome report here that we get digging into the details and can miss that ongoing work to improve processes. So if I could use one word to describe the evolution of this process, I'd say we've arrived at a place where the process is very systematic. I think that bodes well for things like when we think about our EDI work that we're endeavoring to undertake and do better at. Having a systematic policy in place that really brings all people to the table and offers everyone the same kind of access and opportunity and timelines to access these resources is a really good thing. I think it's something we can all point to and feel proud about the development of our city. And I think that this is also a policy that other municipalities can and will look to and shape their policies off of. So great work, and please pass that on to everybody that's been part of the process. Including the community committees that I know were part of the feedback process too. So one quick observation, 2 questions. I'll be supporting the motion in front of us to adopt this policy. Again, to some of the comments of my colleagues, we have opportunity to refine this over time, and I'm not interested in delaying this any further. I think there's some really positive steps here that I'd like to capture for the current year and not delay another year. But I do just want to register these 3 pieces. 1 quick observation, 2 questions. So the first observation, if you look at the lists under the heading policy statement on pages 1 and 2, and the lists on pages 7 and 8 under arts and sports and rec, the terms and conditions piece, those 2 lists don't quite align. Having sat on some of those community committees, I know how seriously people take them. You do a great job of getting them out to folks, and they're reviewed, and when decisions are being made, people take those really seriously. So I just thought maybe we could give another quick look to those. I don't think my words are failing me here, but like, I think I would feel comfortable voting for this policy, and that's not a material tweak in my mind. It's just cleaning up some language. So just to give a look, especially, well, I won't go further than that. You're capable to take that direction. The questions, I'll go first to page 4, eligibility and ineligibility. So
Sorry, Councillor Penrod, could you use the which number point? Because my copy doesn't have page numbers on it.
Yep, sorry. So I'll just pull that up quick. So it is under heading 2 policy statement, 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs in, and then on my copy, it comes over a page. So there's 7 bullets there. And then later in the document.
That's attachment 1. Attachment 1.
Yeah, later in the document at 5.4, terms and conditions, and 5.3.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So there's just a little bit of a discrepancy between the way different things are lumped together, and I think that could potentially be confusing for folks. So just wanted to flag that for you.
Thank you, Councillor.
I don't want, yeah. So then if I could go to 5.1.2. This one is a little bit more material. 5.1.2, the following entities and purposes are ineligible for municipal grant funding. I wonder if you could, the sixth bullet says activities advancing specific political, moral, or religious points of view. For me, that feels a bit broad and could catch groups and disqualify groups as diverse as Girl Scouts, Hindu Society of Beaumont, Kinsman Club, Knights of Columbus, anyone who's inherited sort of a purpose statement that has some kind of moral value in it. And so my suggestion would just be to strike that, but maybe you can give me some history on where that came from. If it's a best practice we've pulled from other pieces, you know, maybe my concern is misguided there.
Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity to review this. This wording as part of the review is, you know, sourced from other existing policies. And I believe the spirit of this is to address ensuring that municipal funding is directed towards initiatives that are intended for the community as a whole, and not meant to exclude any particular group. So in the sense of not unlike how the community grant program, religious groups are eligible to receive funding, but being of that religion cannot be a requirement of participants to therefore participate.
Okay, thank you. I think that alleviates my concern somewhat. And I know you also do a good job of kind of going through with the committees and just giving some color about kind of the intention behind the policy. So I'm happy enough with that. And we can, if it becomes more of an issue, we can address that down the road. And then under the micro grants piece at 5.10.3 fund disbursement schedule. Again, just because the micro grants are significantly different than what we're doing in the other three branches, and they're really meant to kind of capture sort of disorganized or barely organized, if I understand the vision of it correctly, initiatives that are very grassroots, right? And so I just wonder if by, and maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but I see for all grant amounts, an initial payment of 0% of the total is forwarded, and then 100% is received after the approval, or the reporting is completed. Is that correct?
It would be more consistent with like a reimbursement type method.
So my concern there is just, I wonder if we're creating unintentionally a barrier, especially with respect to equity deserving individuals or groups. So it's just a concern that I want to put onto the record. Again, I'll be supporting the motion in front of us. But maybe that's something that we can watch for and listen for feedback on carefully. Or if it's something that we can amend without making kind of a material adjustment to the policy, I'd be happy to hear thoughts on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCook, you have the floor, followed by Councillor Televus, then we get to the motion.
Thank you. I won't belabor the point. I think Mr. Suter kind of summed it up in a great way. This is evolving, and I think we'll make changes as we go. I was prepared to make the motion if
you want to make it right now. I'll entertain that. You want to make that motion right now? I'd be fine with that. Madam Clerk, put the motion on the screen, please, and Councillor McCook will make it. I was going to after you're done, but if you want to make down, you go right ahead. Thank you.
I'll move that council policy number C52 municipal grant funding program policy as set out in attachment 1 of the January 23, 2024 report be approved, and that council policy number C15.1 community grant program be repealed.
Thank you, councillors. To speak to the motion before I go on to the next question.
Most of what has already been said this evening. This came to committee of the whole, and we had the opportunity to give a lot of our input, and this is what we see in front of us is comes from a lot of the input we requested and put out. And so I think as was previously said, this is evolving, and I look forward to anything that comes back. And I know Ms. Mancher will make notes of anything that comes from the community throughout the process and anything we can improve upon. And I'm sure we'll make those changes when they come. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. Appreciate that and appreciate making the motion and save me doing it. Appreciate it. Counselor Telewis, Nathan, you have the floor before we go to the motion.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to speak to that motion. I understand it's an evolving process. And this is an opportunity maybe for a quick fix, but we want to be somewhat equal in our approach too, and we want to be inclusive and all encompassing. Run through a real life scenario here. I have a group, Culture and Multiculturalism, that come to me and they're asking for a grant. Well, come to administration, they're asking for a grant. Yeah, absolutely. You can have 10 grand, but only 50% of that. Okay, but I'm with arts. Okay, you can have 60 grand, 100% of that. Let's move on to a different subset of these grants, because it's not just sports. I want to make that clear. It's not arts versus sports. There's a lot tied into this community grant, and they're at a significant disadvantage compared to the arts group. For example, 40K spend is required to get $20,000, whereas for the other group, only 20,000 spend is required to get 20,000. So I want to mention all these groups that are tied to the community grants, because again, it's not a sports versus arts. So we have recreation and leisure, we have culture and multiculturalism, we have heritage, we have environment, we have social services and well-being, and increasing community connections. All of these, or a lot of these, are also underrepresented. So putting them at a disadvantage at 50% isn't fair. So I would like to put in an amendment to this motion that everyone is 100% across the board.
Madam Clerk, can we draft an amendment? We'll take a moment and let Madam Clerk do what she needs to do. You can look at it, Nathan, and you can make your amendment motion, then we'll debate it quickly and move on it, and then we'll go to the motion again.
Thank you.
Depends how the amendment goes through. You know what I mean?
Condition, so 5.3 and 5.4.
And you, sorry, you said 5.4 or 5.5?
5.3, 5.4. 5.3 is the arts, and then 5.4 is the community grants.
Did you say 5.2 as well?
5.2?
There's 2 bullet points under 5.2.
They're at 100% though, right? Yeah. So just to clarify, it's just looking to adjust 5.4 to 100%.
Just 5.4? Okay.
And my apologies, it falls into 5.2 as well. Thanks.
Please make your motion.
Thank you. I would like to make the motion that council policy number C52 municipal grant funding program be amended with the following changes to terms and conditions under section 5.2 from 50% to 100% and 5.4 from 50% to 100%.
Okay, you've already stated your position, which is already in the amendment, so I'm going to move on to other council members who wish to speak
Can
to
I
the
speak to
motion.
it for 2 more seconds, please?
Very quickly, you already stated your position and caused the amendment, so very quickly, please.
Yep, so again, I want to make sure that we're on a level playing field here. The art grant is already at a 3-to-1 advantage in terms of the level of funding. And then the other groups under community grants are significantly reduced at the 20,000 and then on top of that, the 50%.
Thank you, appreciate that. Members of council willing or have any comments on this amendment motion? Kathy, I can't see you or Steve. Kathy or Steve, any comments on this amendment?
Mayor, I think I'm okay with that change, but I just want to make a point that the amount of money we give out to one organization reduces the amount we have available to give to others in that same stream. So it doesn't change the amount we're giving out overall. It just reduces the number of organizations that can access the money, is how I'm seeing it. But I might be wrong on that, and maybe Ms. Manchur can correct me, but I think we're still saying up to 100%, and it's going to depend on the committee and council how to divvy the money up, but the total pot stays the same.
Certainly, to clarify, I think one way to look at it would be the amount of funding doesn't change. What the changing of the percentage does is with 50%, you're asking a group to have matching dollars. So by taking that up to 100%, you're taking away that requirement to provide matching dollars. So currently,
Can you
for the
maybe
community.
restate that, if you don't mind?
So currently, the way it's written, if a group is eligible for up to 50% of eligible expenses, that then implies that they are somehow paying for the other 50% of the expenses, whether that's through whichever mechanism. By saying that the funding is eligible up to 100% of the cost, it removes that requirement from an organization or from an applicant to provide matching dollars.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Barnard, does that answer your question?
I wasn't thinking of it that way, but now it's got me thinking a whole other way. And I'm just wondering, as to Councilor Monkoff-Swain's point earlier, this may be significant enough that we have to send it back.
Well, we have to vote on the motion first, I guess, before we can do that, so.
Because it is really changing the intent of the matching dollars is a way that council can ensure that it's not, that it's really carefully thought out and the groups have capacity to deliver on the event. You know, and I spoke earlier, and I do still think that the arts community is playing catch up and doesn't have quite the capacity yet to make all of the matching dollars work. So that was why I was supportive of it in the past, but now I am really having to rethink. So I'll listen to what others want to do, but it's making me think differently again.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Monkoff-Swain. Sam, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. So you spoke very well on this. You had me until Ms. Manchur spoke. I get the intention there, but now you've been able to clarify the impact of that. So I'm gonna vote against this and really just to move this forward, get it going. Let's see the feedback. Let's see the impact of that. Let's see if we need to adjust it as we go. So yeah. I was ready to vote. That's why I shut it off. I was going to vote for, and then we had an answer. So I'll be voting against this, but I totally get where you're going.
Thanks, Council. I'll be voting against it myself too. Councilor Monkoff, or sorry, Councilman Newkirk. I think your hand is up. I can't see you, but I'm told you have a question. Steve, you have the floor, followed by Councilor McCook.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to speak to this motion for a council and a group in a room that talks about equity in how we approach situations. I would be surprised that folks would vote against this, actually. What we're saying is one group can get funding up to 100%. and the others can't. The proposed change, all it says is that all the groups can get funding up to 100%. It's actually that simple. If we leave it at 50%, that answer that we just heard from administration says that the underrepresented groups may be challenged to come up with matching dollars and therefore not be able to move something forward. So why wouldn't we want to give underrepresented groups an opportunity to 100%? I would be surprised if this room voted against that. So I'll just leave it there, and I will be supporting in favor of this amending motion, and it'll be curious to see how this one goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCook, followed by Councillor Penrod. Kat, you have the floor.
Yeah, I can understand the hesitation in that potentially you look to fund 100% and you're not sure if they're able to, and you're not potentially funding 100% of a project, you're funding potentially part of it. And so if they can't come up with another part, they may not be able to. In the spirit of inclusivity, I will vote in favor of this because I do think it is important, and for the reasons that Councillor Van Newkirk just said, and I think we see how it goes, and if we find people are challenged and we're having issues and people aren't able to put to do whatever it is they're setting out to do because they don't have the additional funds, then I think at that point then we return and review it. But as I said, in the spirit of inclusivity, I will vote in favor of this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrod. Phil, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mayor Daniluk. So since Councillor Van Newkirk didn't reiterate his earlier point, I just will take that opportunity just to say we have this robust, systematic process that keeps improving, and that includes these committees of residents that are supported by administration who pre-screens everything to make sure we have kind of good faith, quality proposals that come forward. And then those residents sit and really comb through those applications and in fact interview applicants and really drill down on those things before they eventually bring a recommendation to us. So I think I know that I'll be supporting this amending motion. I think part of what we run into here is just I do get nervous when we start amending things on the fly because I think it's not great to, there might be some unforeseen circumstances when we do this real quick, but in this case, I think it's a solid amending motion. I'm in favor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further members of council wish to speak to this motion before I do? Seeing none, I'm voting against the motion because it goes against everything we've done on the committee of the whole to get this report to this point. It does, the arts is playing catch up, as Councillor Barnard mentioned. We did the whole funding model based on exhaustive work by council and administration and user groups to get to this point. And I think this kind of goes against what we tried to do in the first place. So I'll vote against the motion. So seeing no further members of council willing to speak on this motion, council, I'll ask you to vote on the motion before you. Councillor Barnard, how do you vote?
Opposed.
Councillor Newkirk, how do you vote?
In favor.
Okay. In favor. So I've got, yeah, I can do the math in my head here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 in favor and 3 against. Against were myself, Councillor Monkoff Swain, and Councillor Barnhart. Motion is carried 4-3. I got the math right, didn't I? I think I did. It's been a long night, so, okay. That carries on. So that's been amendment. So the motion before us then has been amended. Yeah. Councilor Cook, the motion is still on the table, just amended as we did a moment ago. Oh, Councillor, oh, sorry, Councillor. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. So the motion now is amended, so it'll be a new motion. So I'll just put that up on the screen in 2 seconds
Yes,
here.
thank you. If you could, please, that'd be great.
Redoing it with the
Thank you.
included amendment.
Okay, take your time. That's good to go, Madam Clerk. Councilor Cook, would you wish to remake the motion, please? If you're prepared to do that. Oh,
I will move that council policy number C52 municipal grant funding program policy be approved as amended, and that council policy number C15.1 community grant program be repealed.
thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Barnhart or Councillor Van Newkirk, I can't see you. Any discussion on the motion?
No, I'm good.
None from me, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. Seeing no discussion on the motion, council, please vote on the motion. In front of you, Councillor Barnhart, how do you vote?
In favor, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Van Newkirk, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. That carries unanimously, 7-0. All right, we are moving along as best we can here. Next on our agenda is 7.5, notice of motion, which is from myself. I'll make it quickly and I'll speak to it briefly, and council can decide to vote on it in a moment here. I move that by the end of the second quarter of 2024, administration prepare a report on the feasibility, cost, opportunity for grant funding, and any other considerations, including models used in other municipalities, municipal jurisdictions, for developing a city snow clearing service for low-income seniors to help support aging in place. Council speaks to it very briefly. It's more so a request for information. I am mostly interested in opportunities for grant funding, and see what jurisdictions do as well in terms of this possible idea. So I asked for support to get this report on the record and see how it may be feasible for the 2025 operating budget. If there's, from my way of thinking, good opportunity for grant funding to make this idea possibly work. With that, I'll leave it to members of council for any questions. Councilor McGough-Swain, Sam, you have the floor.
So I'll be voting in favor of this, and I'll just say I'll be interested to see how people vote in the spirit of inclusivity on this one.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other members of council willing to discuss on this motion? Councillor Barnhart, Councilman Newkirk, I can't see you.
Yeah, Mayor, I would like to, as well, I'm very supportive of this, and I just wondered whether this motion would cover looking at FCSS models, because I do know of programs like this in other municipalities that are using volunteers through FCSS. So I think that's covered, an opportunity for grant funding, but I just thought I'd raise that.
I believe it is. Thank you for raising it. Councilman Newkirk, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, you bet, Mayor. Yeah, I'll support this motion for sure. The one comment that I'll have, Mayor, is that in the past we have heard time and time again that the monetary barrier and determination of low income is a challenge in the municipality. We've asked questions in the past around tying other programs to being low income or some kind of monetary threshold, and been told it's a challenge. So, I will support what's in front of us, and I wholeheartedly expect that the determination of low income, air quotes, will be a part of what comes back from administration, because I do think that'll provide and create some of the challenge. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. That's why I did mention in the motion feasibility, because it may be a great idea, but we don't have the resources to do it. It may not be able to be a functioning program. So I want to give administration as much latitude as possible to give us recommendations on the idea. So seeing no further discussions on the motion before you, Council, I'll ask you to please vote, if you will. Councilor Barnhart, how do you vote?
In favor, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Van Newkirk, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Council. That carries unanimously, 7-0. Thank you, Council, for the support. Looking forward to that report coming back to us in the administration opportunity before second quarter. Thank you. We'll be moving right along here. Next on our agenda is item 9. Now, I know it's 9:11. It's been an hour and a half since we had a break, but we're getting close to the end, so I want to plow through rather than take a 5-minute break. But we may take 5 minutes between open and closed session, but let's just keep plowing through here. Item 9, council inquiries, reports, or responses. Anything from council members? Steve or Kathy? Seeing none, thank you.
No,
We'll move on to city update. Mr. Schwartz. Your mic's on.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll be brief and we'll send this out as we always do. From Community and Social Development, there's a new daddy-daughter program that's going to be started up to help enhance father and daughter relationships. The date will be to be determined. The new also is a mental load masterclass. The dates are to be determined. And that's the whole notion of helping people deal with all the many things that go on in their life. Raising a family, in other words, and other things. Early child development exposition is on February 7th, and it's an event for parents, caregivers, and educators to explore the valuable resources available for children in Beaumont. Also on February 28th, which is Pink Shirt Anti-Bullying Day, FCS is hosting a bullying and inclusive spaces workshop in partnership with the RCMP. From Computer and Analytics, the public engagement for the redevelopment of our website has commenced. The survey will run, as you can see, the end of January, and we reported last time, the last meeting, that the target is to have that up and running for the first part of July. Part of the public engagement, it's a real priority for us to drive digital innovation, and that comes right out of the council strat plan. So one method of communication will be redeveloping that website. We've got a lot of great information on our website. Only problem is you can't find it. So that and a whole other bunch of things are going to occur that's going to help engage us with our residents and businesses and visitors. So the functionality of the website, you can see that there's we've been asking input and for users, we're testing new things in different parts of the organization and the community. So we'll bring that all back together and see what we can design for our community. And that's what the what's next is talking about. As far as recreation, community center building, we've got some numbers there. The usage in 2023, number of guests, 2022 usage, as you can see, it's going through the roof. And with that becomes a bunch of work just to maintain those services. Beaumont Sports and Rec, again, similar numbers showing the growth from 1 year to the next. And it's pretty substantial, the numbers. I think I read somewhere, yeah, there are only 3 Saturdays available for the community center to rent for the rest of the year. The ice services at Don Sparrow and Lions Park are now open. Obviously, the cold weather helped us. So we asked people to use caution when out on those surfaces, but 50 below will help make ice for sure. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Any questions for Mr. Schwartz's report? Written report will be coming back to us the next day or so. Looking forward to that. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Number 11 on our agenda. Notice in the motion. Any NOMs, Madam Clerk, this evening? I see a nodding of a head, so I'm assuming we've got something coming. Councilor Telebas, you have the floor for your notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to put forward the notice of motion that at the February 13, 2024 council meeting, I will move that by the end of the second quarter of 2024, administration prepare a proposed amending bylaw that will allow recreational vehicles to be parked on stable surfaces such as gravel pads, maintained grass areas, or sidewalk blocks, provided that safety and nuisance issues are addressed.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any other notice of motion this evening, Madam Clerk? One more. Councilor Telebas, you have the floor.
Thank you. At the February 13, 2024 council meeting, I will move that by the end of the second quarter of 2024, administration prepare a feasibility report on conducting an e-scooter pilot program in Beaumont, similar to the program established in the city of Leduc, and that the report include information on cost, liability, required legislative changes, public engagement approaches, etc.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Any further NOMs, Madam Clerk? Just the two. Just the two. Thank you very much. With that, that brings us to the end of our agenda for the open session. Next is our closed session. I will look for a motion on the screen, Madam Clerk, to move into closed session. I'll make that motion myself when it's ready. Thank you. I move that council move into closed session at 9:16 p.m. pursuant to the Federal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, sections 21 and 24. Council discussion on the motion? Seeing none, council, would you please vote on the motion to move into closed session? Councilor Warner, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. Councilor Van Nieuwkerk, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. That carries unanimously. We'll move into closed session. Thank you. Yeah, we take Thank you. We are back live now after our closed session. We do have motions coming out of our closed session, which I'll move in a moment here. Thank you. We have two motions. Can I make them at the same time, Madam Clerk, or it can be separate? They can be together? Thank you. I move that administration respond to Leduc County's January 18th, 2024 request for Beaumont's position on air utilities rate increase and air utilities request for 50 million from the government of Alberta for infrastructure upgrades. And I move further that administration prepare a letter of support for funding for infrastructure upgrades to the government of Alberta and that Mayor Daniluk sign on behalf of council. Discussion on the motion, council members. Steve, Kathy, any discussion?
No discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing none, members of council, would you please vote on the motion in front of you? Councilor Barnhart, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. Councilman Newkirk, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. That carries unanimously. 7-0, council. Thank you very much. With that, that concludes our meeting.